Good morning, everybody. My name is Councillor Vicky Slade. Welcome to the April meeting of Cabinet. That is your regular notice to please turn off the microphones on your laptop so they don't ping for the next 2.5 hours. We have a really busy agenda for today's. Getting some feedback. Where's the feedback? Patrick, I think we're getting some feedback. Bear with me, we're just trying to sort out some feedback. Okay. Apologies for any feedback that you can hear. We're just trying to resolve a hearing loop issue. So I'd just like to particularly welcome the visitors we have today. We have one member of the public and we have two representatives from University Hospitals Dorset who are going to be making a presentation for item 7. So without further ado, I'd like to pass to Sarah for the housekeeping.
Thank you, Leader. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Many thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. And I have, there's a screen over there. I was going to say I can't see the screen for whoever might be online, but I can see the screen now. So, okay then, agenda item 2 is apologies, or agenda item 1, sorry, is apologies. I don't think we have any apologies, but Councillor Cox is in London and therefore is on screen. That means he's not able to propose or second items, but he is able to talk to them and obviously is able to vote. So, but we have no other apologies. Are you aware of any other apologies on the opposite side?
No, Leader.
Thank you. And agenda item 2, do we have any declarations of interest that need to be made? I don't see any. Obviously, if anybody has any as we go through the item, then please do shout. Agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes. Do we have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And seconder? Councillor Hadley, thank you very much. So are we happy by unanimous agreement that they're okay? Yes, fantastic. So agenda item 4 is public issues, and we've had no petitions submitted on this occasion. We've had 1 question and 5 statements. So first of all, we'll start with our public question. We'll then move to the public statements from Siobhan and Rob, which is being read by Richard, and then we'll move on to Mr. McKinstry. So I'm going to pass to Sarah to read the question from Mr. Olubi.
So, public question from Conor Olubi relating to agenda item 7. The draft local plan says Wessex Fields would provide at least 2,000 new jobs. A figure based on building a roads flyover A338 Wessex Fields link application, strategic transport policies T1 and T2 make it clear that all new development must prioritise active travel and public transport. How does the Cabinet square this contradiction?
Thank you, Sarah, for that, and thank you, Mr. Olubi, for your question. The local plan, the new draft local plan, does not state that there is a need for 2,000 jobs on the Wessex Fields site. That reference goes back to the previous local plan, which was prior to the existing extensions to the hospital and other improvements. The local plan does recognise that the types of jobs that are required on that site being primarily around research and health, and suggests that any residential development should be in the form of key worker housing. Therefore, by establishing jobs which have associated on-site homes, we would expect that most of these new workers and residents would be walking or cycling to work. It's also worth noting that the site is well connected for public transport and active travel routes. There is really no contradiction in terms of prioritisation of active travel for this site. So moving on to our statements, can I invite Siobhan and Richard to come up first? I believe your items are linked, so if you come up together, it might be quicker. And Siobhan, I think you've been here before, so if you could press the button when you're ready to speak.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Siobhan Harrington, Chief Executive of University Hospitals Dorset. My statement is regarding the item on Wessex Fields. This is a win-win decision. The land has unique value to the NHS and partners. A health-led campus leads to high-quality jobs like research and education. We need more homes, especially for the NHS key workers who will walk to work. UHD is an environmental custodian who can make this a net zero site. This proposal is popular, common sense use of the land. It's supported by neighbouring landowners, and we're local with a long-term view. We have every interest in making this work. Expert opinion has set the price following the due process, so a fair deal for taxpayers. We've developed a joint vision for the site over many years. BCP are no longer leading on developing the site. UHD is best placed to progress this. And we have a track record, which can be seen, including a 24 million pathology hub, 13 million for electrical upgrade, net zero buildings. We are keen to further deliver with partners the vision for this site. Thank you.
Thanks, Siobhan. Richard?
Thank you. My name is Richard Renaud, and I'm speaking on behalf of Rob Whiteman, who's our chairman of University Hospitals Dorset. We're keen to work in partnership for the benefit of all our residents. This means taking a one estate approach for best public value. We prepared a briefing for our stakeholders on our intentions for Wessex Fields. As a public body, these are in the public domain, and there is a web link available. We're keen to meet and discuss this with any councillors and partners. This is a great opportunity to address councillors, and we hope to explain more on our progress, and we have a short video as well that you might wish to play at the meeting if that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the presentation and the video are going to be played when we get to item 7. So if you'd like to take your seats back in the public gallery, and I'll call on Mr. McKinstry to make his 3 separate statements that all, I believe, relate to item 7.
They do indeed. Good morning, Cabinet. Statements as follows then. Here we go. First of all, I absolutely welcome the proposal to sell 8 acres of disused arable land at Wessex Fields to the neighbouring freeholder, which is, of course, the University Hospitals Dorset NHS Foundation Trust. Should the sale proceed, it will result in education and training facilities for up to 500 medical undergraduates, sorely needed accommodation for frontline NHS staff, and long-term improvements to the NHS, benefiting the greater part of the conurbation. It is the best possible use for this land. The offer, moreover, is credible and deliverable thanks to the Trust's partnership with Prime plc, who have already delivered key worker housing at Dorchester, Yeovil, Southampton and elsewhere. This then is a tremendously attractive proposal, likely to yield positive, enduring results that are highly tangible. Statement 2. I was also encouraged to hear that a second independent valuation has been commissioned for this site to be carried out according to exacting RICS guidelines. The Council will therefore be getting best consideration for this site in line with established case law, notably Her Majesty the late Queen on the application of Salford Estates versus Salford City Council, 17th of May 2011. That is a fact, and it is a fact that can be held up before the entire planet. Marketing this site would generate unnecessary costs and delay for the Council and the Trust. There's no known private interest currently, and would not necessarily flush out a higher bid, as became apparent when the Council tried marketing land on the north side of Crescent Road in 2023. Then, of course, there is the massive socio-economic value already alluded to. Finally, I'm impressed by the transparent manner in which these proposals are being discussed, with a 3-hour scrutiny meeting held last week, entirely in open session, and a comprehensive 5,000-word report made available to the public, plus related correspondence. I well remember the fire sales of 2023, where the public weren't even told which sites were being disposed of until an officer let them slip, nor was it ever explained why those particular sites had been selected. No such puzzlement exists here. It would be congenial if the administration were to provide all councillors with the head of terms agreement, valuation reports and letters from supporting landowners ahead of the full council meeting of the 23rd of April, and I hope this passes overwhelmingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKinstry. I will respond to that last element during my presentation of the paper, just for your clarity and for the rest of the public, as I'm sure you know what the rules are, but other members of the public might not. So agenda item 5 is the recommendations from the overview and scrutiny committees. I can see that we have Councillor Bartlett here with us today. We also have Councillor Canavan, who is chair of the health scrutiny. I don't see the chairs of the environment and place or children's scrutiny with us, so I'm assuming that we'll be hearing from just 2 of the committee chairs. And just to be clear, agenda item 5 is to present any recommendations for items that are not otherwise on the agenda. So if I turn first of all to Patrick, who's in the room. No, Patrick is shaking his head, nothing that's not on the agenda, but I know you do want to speak on an item that's on the agenda later on, which is fine. Councillor Bartlett, do you have anything that's not otherwise on the agenda?
No, thank you, Leader.
Okay, so we have nothing on agenda item 5 to consider, but as is usual, when we get to the relevant items, once we've made the presentation, before we go to debate, we'll go first of all to the chairs of the committees, then we'll go to any other councillors present, then we'll come to the committee members, and we'll go to the room first and then to people online. So agenda item 6 is the Q3 corporate performance report, which you can find in page 27 to 106 of your agenda. I'm going to be presenting and proposing this report. Have I got a seconder?
Yes, happy to second that one.
Thank you, Councillor Earl. So just turn to my notes. So the corporate performance report is a look back at the council's position in Q3 of 23-24. So that's obviously the back end of last year, and is based on the priorities and the strategies that were already in place, and a snapshot of the measures and delivery plans that were running their course. It's obviously worth noting that from the new municipal year, we'll be working to the new corporate strategy, and in the May Cabinet, you'll see in the report that we are going to be adopting the new delivery plans and the new detailed measures around that new strategy. I'd like to thank all the officers for their work in bringing this up to date. It is not an easy thing to think your way through this report, because what they're having to do is to write the report sort of in readiness for this meeting, which would have been 2 or 3 weeks ago, but they're writing it as if it's actually December last year. And so we're looking at it saying, but we know things have happened that have progressed since then, but actually the report is talking to the third quarter. So I think we need to bear that in mind as we read it. There are 3 red exception reports attached. So the red exception reports are the areas of measures that are being that are targeted, as opposed to areas of work more generally. There is a 4th red area, also red item, which doesn't have an exception report. So there's 3 exception reports. One's around the new homes that have not been started, and it's the exception report explains the sad passing of the project manager that was related to one of them, which has caused part of the delay, and the other one related to Homes England money that we needed the best value notice outcome to reassure Homes England that everything was well, which it absolutely is. The children missing in education, I've had an update from the senior officer relating to that, and I think Councillor Burton might be bringing us up to date on that one. And the rough sleeping is the third area. Again, looking back to last year, things have vastly improved, but we're looking at the end of last year. The fourth area that has a red exception or a red mark is a public health item. And I have asked for an exception report on that because one hasn't been provided due to a misunderstanding about the need to provide it to Cabinet, not just to the Joint Public Health Board. So there's not really much more to say. I'm sure everybody's read it and be keen to hear any debate around it before we move into a new model. And the other thing I just wanted to add is, firstly, I think we need to look in the new model at how meaningful the exception reports are, whether they really are the best way of us addressing those items. And then secondly, it feels to me that the corporate performance report is a really good place for scrutiny committees to start in looking at the areas of performance that they might wish to do deep dives on, because there are exception reports here and items that I would take up and say, well, actually, this feels like a document that scrutiny should get behind, and I would really value that additional work being done by the wider council, so that we can make sure that we improve quarter on quarter. So I will open it up. Do we have any comments first of all, or items from scrutiny chairs? Nope. Anybody in the room or online that's not in Cabinet? So if that's the case, I'll just turn to Cabinet to make any comments. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Four things I was wanted to raise. One was on page 38, in talks in terms of the ecological emergency, and as part of that, we're setting an urban forest strategy. The date for that is set as April 24. The documentation has been prepared, and I know it's of interest to Overview Scrutiny Committee, but I think the timescale is slightly later than we planned for, particularly because we're working on the nature recovery strategy as well, and it ties in with that. So it will be coming forwards, but slightly later than that plan. The second one was on page 39 around unifying the household waste, recycling and food waste, and the document says it's not started. That's not actually correct. There has been quite a bit of work been going on, not least because we've been responding to the national changes to legislation, and there is a members' briefing planned for late April. For all members, and obviously it's something that will come to us, but it's set nationally. We have been allocated some funding. It's not adequate for the task that we want to, so we've appealed that with the department, and that obviously also sets the money that we'd get for ongoing revenue, but it is going forwards. The third one's around on page 46, and it talks in terms of the acquisition of 250 properties for rent by the council over the next 5 years. And it was just a concern which I have raised with my colleague, Councillor Wilson, around displacing existing renters. So I had several people at the weekend writing to me, people actually with quite significant need in private rented accommodation, where they're being evicted in order for the landowner to sell the property, and the council is a potential buyer, and they're complaining about the council when actually we are being hit with a double whammy, really. They're vacating the property to presumably maximise their sale price, and then we're having to find people homes or get involved in trying to relocate people. So there's something about how we can try and encourage, support tenants more than perhaps the landlords in that process, and make sure that we're not unwittingly creating more problems for our own back in terms of that word. And the fourth one was page 75, and it was around lifelong learning. And again, this was something that's highlighted that it's been delayed. It's moved into children's services, and obviously there's a lot of work in children's services. I can see why potentially there it's delayed by other work. But for me, that includes environmental sustainable living as two topics, but it is also about adult learning. So I'm just a bit worried that one's got lost in the weeds because it's gone into children's and become a minor priority compared to other things they've got to deal with. Thank you.
Thanks. I don't know whether any of the Cabinet members in those areas have got anything they want to just say in response, so that we don't lose track of the issues. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I suppose just to kind of come back to Councillor Hadley's point, on the rental properties. I think it's a strategy that we're having to use because of trying to get families out of temporary accommodation and B&Bs in particular. But I think that there is kind of a maybe a reassessment needed on that area kind of thing on the properties, some of the properties that we're purchasing. With that case that you were talking about, I've been in contact with the residents over the weekend, and we're working through that, supporting them. But it's just such a difficult situation, and I think it's the epitome of the housing crisis at the minute, that we find ourselves in this kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul situation with housing. But yeah, it is something that we're definitely aware of and dealing with.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Does anybody else have anything they wanted to add? No. So any other comments on this whole paper? Councillor Burton?
Yes, because you asked for a bit of a comment on the inclusion, and yes, you're quite right. I mean, school attendance is quite a complex issue at the moment, for a number of reasons. A diagnostic has been done on this data to have a look at what is happening, and some work is being done now to try to address this. So I can bring you up to date further on that in the future if you like, Leader.
I think that would be useful. Thank you, Councillor Burton. Has anyone else got anything else they want to add or discuss on this paper? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just in reference to the public health point mentioned earlier on, and I think it's a fairly new section figure within this quarterly corporate performance report. Just as an update on the sort of red area action required, it's a benchmark figure for the percentage of mothers who receive first face-to-face antenatal contact with a health visitor, reported at 55%. There's not a national benchmark for this under the Department of Health and Social Care's Healthy Child Programme, but there is a local sort of aspiration for 95% on it. At the moment, the agreed focus of the service is to prioritise postnatal visits, which currently relates to the sort of what the comments within the narrative within the report showed. I'm advised that all mothers to be are offered an antenatal visit, but many don't take this up, either because they're not first-time mums or because they're under the care of midwifery at the hospital, so they're getting care through other routes. But so it's not a national target, but yeah, it's a local aspiration. But I'll be picking up with public health as sort of monitoring of that and improving that performance.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Of course, we have got an item on public health coming a little bit later in the session. So anything else on this paper, or are we happy to note the contents and acknowledge that the request is that we don't take the Q4 because we will be moving on to the new method, and we want to actually go straight into the new system rather than keeping on talking to out of date priorities. So if we're content with that, all those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. So let's move on to item 7, which is the disposal of land at Wessex Fields, Riverside Avenue. Now, a couple of things just to say on this one. There are some confidential appendices. Appendix 1, 2, 3, 5 and 6 would require us to move it into exempt session. As our member of the public noted, we managed to get through scrutiny without any need to go into exempt session, and I would be very grateful if we could avoid doing that for transparency purposes. For clarity, all councillors under their privileges are able to see all of the confidential and exempt papers. It is expected that they are keeping it confidential, and it is totally unacceptable if any of that information does get into the public domain. I have asked the question that where information is shared, is there anything that can be done to actually sanction people, because we're all asked to keep these things confidential for very good reason, and it feels very wrong that I don't know whether Standards Board have any opportunity to withdraw that privilege from people if they're then going to be asked to vote on it at a later date. So all of these confidential items are available for all councillors, ready for full council when this matter will go on the 23rd of April, subject to the outcome from today. I do have recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board to take. I've also had Councillor Debman who's asked to address Council Cabinet, which is absolutely fine, and I'm quite sure that the other members in the room will be keen to do so as well. So really, there's not an awful lot to say about this one. It's been through a 3-hour scrutiny. The proposal in front of us is for us to sell the site to the University Hospital Dorset NHS Foundation Trust, which has got to be a much longer title than Bournemouth Hospital as it was before, so that they can develop the site for what was fundamentally the aspiration that has been on the table since the site was bought by Bournemouth Council in 2017. I remember going in 2019 being shown this really futuristic model of what might go on this site, and being excited and terrified in equal measure about what we might have on our doorstep. We then went, just to make sure that the timeline is clear, we then went to a public event in January 2020, where we had a huge number of local people come forward to tell us what they'd like the site to be. The conclusion from that was that people wanted it to be a site that was for research, education, health, with the associated housing and the associated businesses that would support that. And we entered into a memorandum of understanding with the hospital and the university about how we move that forward. There was a soft market testing at that time to see which organisations would be interested in using that site. That was done just after the first COVID lockdown, and the output from that was received at around about the time that our administration ended our first administration, and it went into a different administration in the autumn of 2020. That's really important because there have been some suggestions about alternative uses for this site, alternative ownerships for this site, that there weren't any negotiations happening with any other parties. There were some responses to that soft market testing, but nothing further happened. In late 2020, the council then approved the sale of part of the site to University Hospitals Dorset for their pathology lab, which I believe is due to open on the 20-something of May, which is very exciting. And we've since started the construction of the access road, which, you know, the compound is already out and work being done. So there's been a long history of moving this site towards a really strong relationship with the hospital. This interest came in on an informal basis in the autumn, but no formal bid for this site came in until January of this year, with a request to move this through because an opportunity had appeared for funding to take this site on and develop it, which I think is really exciting. We know that this has been to the cross-party asset working group around whether it should be sold directly or under open market conditions, and you'll see in the report the reasons why they originally made that recommendation, but then scrutiny said actually we've now had assurances, and Cabinet will all have seen the letters, which I've asked to be appended to the papers for full council as well, from those people we thought may wish to challenge this sale, that the 3 letters that have all confirmed that they would be content for this to proceed. We've also had the Red Book valuation, which is known to be the way public sectors deal with each other to save huge amounts of legal costs and delay. So I'm content that we've done the due diligence to make this happen. I'm really keen that our visitors share their presentation and their video so that we've got the context of what is available for them. And I'm grateful that Councillor Bartlett allowed that to be shown at the presentation to be gone through at scrutiny last week. So I'm going to pass over to Richard and Siobhan to do that, so that when our members of council speak, they actually speak with the full information. I hope everyone's okay with that proposal. So do I have a seconder first of all for this? Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Happy to
seconding. And Siobhan and Richard, can I bring you up to the table? Sarah, have you got access to? Somebody's got access to the report. Yep. Okay. So over to you.
Thank you for enabling us to come and talk today. I think we're going to try and show the video, which is short, but actually show that first. And if we have an issue, we then move on to the presentation.
Hi, I'm Sean, a final year medical student living in Bournemouth Hospital residences, along with another 200 staff. I'd like to showcase the key benefits that the NHS and our local community could reap by taking the lead role on Wessex Fields, the 8-acre site near the Royal Bournemouth Hospital, which is currently owned by the council. As a medical student working at University Hospitals Dorset and about to graduate, I'm looking forward. This is a unique moment in time to decide the future of this land. In this presentation, we'll explain how creating a health-led campus on Wessex Fields could result in numerous benefits for homes, jobs, the environment and health, while offering the best value for taxpayers. We're also going to hear from various experts about this opportunity. There's no doubt that Dorset fits the criteria for where a new medical school should go. Having a health campus approach would also be a major boost for the regional economy and health services.
Whilst the relationship between Bournemouth University and University Hospitals Dorset are very, very strong, and we train a range of professionals for the healthcare sector, there are still gaps in the market. We are not training doctors, dentists, and a range of other allied health professionals. If we are able to increase the training of these professionals in the region, the population will benefit. There are two barriers we face with respect to increasing the training capacity in the region. The first is accommodation for our students and the increased workforce we require to bring in the training to the region. The second is specialist buildings that we require to train the students in. Bournemouth is a very densely populated region, and having these accommodation services ideally placed closer to the hospital provides us with a great opportunity to train people who are also likely to remain in the places they train.
The real opportunity in Dorset is to create a living laboratory which brings together the health service, patients and industry. I think this would do several things. It would open an opportunity where the false silos between NHS organisations, local authorities, other public sectors and industry could once and for all truly collaborate with a single purpose. Building something on Wessex Fields would allow all of this to come together.
Housing is a major factor in recruitment and retention of staff, and it's something I'm particularly passionate about.
The NHS is traditionally always a very transient workforce in terms of in this country and from overseas as well. So that having actually affordable key worker housing available will be a really big help in terms of actually getting more staff into the organisation.
A recent example of key worker housing is Alexandra House in Dorchester. Wessex Fields is an ideal site to replicate this model. UHD is already a partner with this provider, and together we could build up to 500 homes here. But key worker housing is not a profitable option for a commercial developer, or even a housing association. It needs a landowner willing to see the bigger picture and benefit beyond just a rental income. Only UHD fits that bill. At the top of my agenda is the environment. UHD has made great progress in reducing its carbon emissions and cutting congestion. Now Wessex Fields offers an amazing opportunity to go further.
We can tap into geothermal energy right here. It's a totally clean, zero carbon energy resource that's constantly being renewed. Geothermal energy can release so much heat that actually the best way to approach this is to connect up lots of different consumers. You've got University Hospitals Dorset consuming a certain amount of energy. You might have the local swimming baths that need heating as well. And you connect that all up. That's your district heating system. But you always need a large consumer to make that project viable. and large acute hospitals are ideally positioned to help release the opportunity from geothermal.
Congestion and parking around the hospital is a significant factor affecting staff and patients. The huge advantage of key worker homes on site is 500 less trips to and from site every day. The sites are already well linked to public transport and the cycle network, with a multi-million-pound investment planned to improve this further. But for many patients and some staff, a car journey will be the only viable option. Another factor in recruitment and retention of staff is safe and secure parking on site.
I've been a midwife here for 15 years and I've seen how things have changed. To entice people to work here, it's really crucial that we can show them that they've got somewhere to park that's accessible and that affordable housing is available to them as well.
As with any agreement between public bodies, it's important that the best value is achieved for both parties. In this case, due process was followed, and the Wessex Field was given a Red Book valuation by an independent surveyor.
A Red Book valuation can be used to provide a certificate of value of a property. It takes into account the complexities and individualities of each property or asset, and in that way can be relied upon between the parties. I'm content that the report was put together in the correct way and that it provided a fair value for both parties, and it was produced in a way that was compliant with procedure.
By working closely with the council, we've already been able to deliver on similar projects. The council sale of the land previously to the hospital allowed the building of the new pathology hub.
I'm currently standing in our new One Dorset Pathology Hub. It's a fantastic facility which we opened in November last year, so it really is brand new. This laboratory serves the entire county of Dorset and its population. It is a wonderful facility and it was designed around optimising the diagnostic processes that we use in pathology, but also around the staff so that they have the very best environment in which to do their work. In order to realise this vision, first off we needed to acquire land, and that was only possible through collaboration with the council.
So the gains to the region and its population are huge. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity that we cannot afford to miss.
That's great. So over to you for adding on to that, because that was pretty comprehensive, wasn't it?
I actually think it says everything that the PowerPoint slides were going to say. So, I mean, what I would say to all of you, you know, I've worked in the NHS for 38 years, can't quite believe it, and I'm a nurse. And actually, you know, we're really privileged to do these roles. It's very rare to get an opportunity like this, where you can really, as an NHS organisation, really think about how you are that anchor institution working with partners, really improving local care, making care at UHD excellent, but actually making it the best place to work. And I think this is just such a unique opportunity and really cements the partnership arrangements that we have very strongly with colleagues across BCP. So thank you. I won't say any more. We're very happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Siobhan. So I'm going to suggest you stay at the table for any potential questions rather than having you hopping up and down. So I'm going to pass first of all to Councillor Bartlett because he has the recommendations from his committee. Then I'm going to go to Councillor Canavan. I'm going to give him the privilege of being the Health Committee. I know they haven't talked to it, but I'm going to give you that. And then if anyone else wants to come in, and then we'll go to Councillor Dedman.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I think it's fair to say that we have some pretty probing and in-depth scrutiny on this item, and there's not much more to say. I think the record speaks for itself, but the board did agree the following recommendation: that the Cabinet approve the disposal of the council-owned land at Wessex Fields to the University Hospitals Dorset NHS Foundation Trust on such terms to be approved by the Director of Finance, acting in his capacity as Corporate Property Officer in consultation with the property holder for finance. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. I wasn't actually intending to say a great deal about this, because I think scrutiny, thanks to the help of Councillor Bart, has done a really good job actually to make sure that you've done that due diligence work that you referred to. I think that's a good piece of work. I just wanted to pick up, though, if I may, on a couple of things that you said in the introduction, which is I am concerned about a couple of things that have appeared on social media as a consequence of all of that discussion. Because I think the role of scrutiny is to ask those questions and to test that stuff. Sometimes that is interpreted as opposition, and I think that's really unfortunate because that's not what this is about, actually. So that's one thing. But the other issue is this issue of confidentiality. I mean, we are privileged, I think, to see, you know, the details of that paper, the details of the reports and the money and all of that. And that is, you know, that is not to be taken lightly, I don't think. So I think it is unfortunate, you know, that there is then public commentary which appears to suggest that the authors of that were not only aware of the price that was being paid for this land, or being paid to the hospital for this land, but also that they were aware of the price that Bournemouth Council originally paid for the land. Both of those things seems to me confidential. So it is regrettable in my view, and I just wanted, if I may, to just give you whatever assurance I can that it wasn't anything to do with either me or my group, for what that's worth. But I think Cabinet can now take that decision, you know, in the knowledge that you've done everything you can to test this, and that you can now, you know, move forward with it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you very much, Leader. And as ever, I appreciate the invitation to address Cabinet. What a fantastic presentation, and it certainly sort of hits the right mark for the users and those that will actually benefit, both professionally from the training, etc., but also across the wider region. And I wholeheartedly want to dive in with both feet to support that new model. And it is a brave new model, and I'm so pleased that the feedback which was executed by the previous administration, the Unity Alliance, was listened to, particularly on as regards key workers, because we can always get overtaken by the need to either have revenue or to make the most that we can out of any particular property deal or land deal in this particular case. I'm pleased to see that there is work towards the active travel, because that was a different part of the feedback, that there should be consideration for our vital NHS care workers, whatever their level, to be able to get and fulfill their shift system easily. There was proposals of, you know, the NHS doing similar to what the university does, lay on their own buses for their shift workers, etc. So I'm pleased to see that. Just before I dive in with both feet, I think it's Article 35 in the paper. I just wanted a little bit of reassurance again for the value for money, and I appreciate the fact that the Red Book value is there, and it's to benefit both sides equally. There was, when we sold the land for the pathology, I think I may well have been one of the lone voices that sort of raised the spectre of the land actually being leased and being retained by BCP as a revenue stream and some degree of control over their future plans. I'm not saying that was the right decision or the wrong decision, but my question here is that in the considerations for the valuation of the land and the disposal of the land, was consideration given to the value and the benefits of leasing the land as opposed to selling it outright? So that's my question, because it doesn't immediately leap out in the papers, and I won't touch on the confidential papers in any way, shape or form. And I think the public sort of need to be aware, if all those considerations in the due diligence, including leasing the land rather than releasing it in entirety to the trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bob. Councillor, sorry, just crossed that invisible line. Our Chief Finance Officer is going to respond to that. Mr. Richards.
Thank you, Chair. The report, section 33, outlines a number of different models and options that were considered with regards to disposal of this land. And it does reflect on whether or not it should be a long lease or a freehold. And the proposal being put forward is that it's a freehold disposal. It also considers whether or not the site should be sold as a whole or broken up in and subdivided into smaller plots. And it recommends the option to sell the site as a whole site. It also considers whether or not it should be sold now as seen or subject to planning conditions, and it recommends that it should be sold as seen. Those are the recommendations that are contained and discussed in the report and proposed to members for consideration.
Thanks. So I think we can be assured that those options were considered and that the professional recommendation is to proceed with this option. But I think it's absolutely right that we should always be challenging what the alternative would be and weighing up those pros and cons. Councillor Carl-Brown, did you want to speak on this one? No? Okay, just here to observe. That means I can go to Councillor Dedman online.
Oh, hello. Thank you, Leader. Can I just say that I was not only on ONS, but I was on the asset working party. I mentioned at ONS, just as a sidelight, that I was involved with the site in the 80s. And I was kindly reminded that that was before some councillors were born. So thanks very much for that. The leader clarified some of what I was going to say, which was what was said at ONS. But I really want to say why I changed my position, and I think a lot of us did, from the Assets Working Party, which was that we didn't at the time have all of the information which we are now in possession of. And we were under the impression that there was a strong likelihood of a much higher offer and a legal challenge, which we now know, as the leader has informed us, and as we know at ONS, has been resolved. So that did not cloud our thinking, but that was one of the principles that we were looking at. And unfortunately, although I've been a councillor for far too long, I hadn't remembered the 2000 Act in that respect, and the One Estate Act, which embodies the principle of favouring disposal of interest in land which the authority considers will help it to secure the promotion or improvement of the economic, social and environmental well-being. And I think that has now been much put into words, and very kindly was put into words by Rob Whiteman at ONS. So I regret that I didn't remember that at the Assets Disposal Party, and that is why I changed my view from one meeting to another. And now, obviously, I think that it is very clear to go ahead. And certainly it will be a social asset to us all. So thanks very much, Leader, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. And I think it is important, isn't it, when people when the Asset Working Group came out with one view and actually then the majority of those people changed their view. And obviously we now have another opportunity. Obviously Cabinet will make its recommendation today, but this will go to full council. So there will be 76 councillors who will all be able to express their view, having had the journey and the benefit of all of the information. So that's, and it's difficult to change your mind, I think, sometimes. And I think it's great when people are comfortable with that. So everybody who asked to speak has now spoken. So I'm going to go to Cabinet. Obviously, if anyone has any specific questions for Siobhan or Richard, or just wishes to raise their comments or debate, then open it up. Councillor Cox is going to start us off. Then I'll go to Councillor Wilson and Councillor Martin.
Thanks very much for proposing this item, Leader. This paper really is a multi-layered win-win for so many in our community, providing we go for option one. It's a win-win for the council as it brings in capital receipts for transformation, plus obviously also the additional council tax and business rates. It's a win-win for the hospital as it provided much needed expansion space. It's a win-win for local residents, as it's providing better NHS facilities. It's a win-win for local businesses, as it provides opportunities for more high-tech investment and secondary R&D services. It's also a win-win for the environment, eliminating the need for a flyover and investing in green energy. And finally, it's a win-win for nurses, providing much needed affordable accommodation. The sale fits perfectly with the ambitions of the Three Towns Alliance for BCP. We very much welcome the recommendations of the ONS committee, and indeed the contributions from the hospital and Mr. McKinstry earlier. As far as I'm concerned, it's a complete no-brainer, and I would urge everyone to get behind option 1 and make it happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cox. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, I want to say really well done to yourself, Councillor Cox, and everyone at the hospital. I think this is, and also to scrutiny. I think this is actually one of the fine examples of when the council's actually been able to do something quite quickly and quite effectively, and everyone seems to be in agreement, more or less, that this is a really positive way forward. So I think well done is really in order. I have one question. I mean, I'm very, very excited about the key worker housing. Obviously, holding the portfolio of housing, it's really good to see something in that area come forward. I previously worked at the hospital for 6 years as a housekeeper and as a ward clerk, so a bit of an interest there. But I just wanted to understand the eligibility criteria. I don't know if you thought that far ahead, but in terms of that key worker housing, because obviously it isn't just nurses and doctors at the hospital. There are porters, ward clerks, chefs, dietitians, all sorts. You know, the list is endless, really. So I just wanted to understand a little bit more about that. And just to commend as well the quality of housing from the video in Dorchester looks really good. So very exciting.
Can I ask Richard to respond to that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's open to all NHS staff. Our principle is we already have 500 units housing at Poole and at Bournemouth. And because the demand is so great, we're generally having to limit people to 6 months, and we prioritise particularly overseas, then out of area, and then students. But because of the demand is so much higher, we've got a rapid turnover. What we're hoping here is to be particularly aimed at young professionals who either newly qualified or new to the area, who can then stay and know and have certainty for at least several years, which will allow saving for deposits and also getting to know the area, because we find that a lot of overseas educated nurses and doctors can quite often come to Dorset, find the house pricing so high, and compared to the rest of the country, and because wages are the same outside of London, we find an awful lot move up north afterwards. So we've done a lot of work training and bring them into the NHS and into Dorset, and then we lose them a year later. So we're really looking to target that group of professionals who will stay. And again, with the medical students, if we're successful, and the Southwest is looking to double the number of undergraduates in medicine, there's a 60-70% of those doctors in training tend to stay in the local region. So again, we're looking to try and retain. So I think the strategy is to offer some really high quality and longer term.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be very brief because Councillor Cox sort of summed it all up very well. I just wanted to share my own observations of UHD and RBH. So in a different capacity, in a different professional life before I was elected to this council in October 2022, I spent an awful lot of time at both RBH and Poole hospitals, pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and post-pandemic, observing, writing about the amazing work that goes on in both those hospitals. And understanding and seeing for myself not only that incredible work and the dedication that we're all aware of, but also the vision and ambition of the leadership of the hospitals. So I'm absolutely delighted to support what is an incredible option one, an incredible opportunity, and the compelling case that have been made by Richard and Siobhan. I think this is an incredible thing that's going to happen.
And I would say that having spent the last nearly a year on Cabinet and on the council, it's not often that we get something as compelling, exciting and uplifting as this to look forward to and to be part of. So I think it's brilliant. And another fantastic example of collaboration, ongoing collaboration between the local authority and UHD. So thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Andy Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I was likewise going to reflect on my previous life was working in the NHS within Dorset, and if it makes Councillor Deadman any happier, I was visiting Bournemouth Hospital. I think in the 1980s. I can't remember exactly when it went up, but certainly when it was quite new as part of my working role. But also it was really good on the video to see quite a few familiar faces, and Dr. Phil Richardson was one of those in particular who I can remember when he was very excitedly talking about bringing a medical school to Dorset and actually trying to get the training in our own area rather than having it in Southampton and having to be at the edge of that work. So it's been a very long time coming. It's the vision, and I know Richard again as a previous colleague has been working on this for a very long time, and we've already seen the work in transforming Poole Hospital and Bournemouth Hospital, which was all part of the clinical service review, and this is all part of that as well. That's a lot of disruption for staff. It's a lot of disruption in the area, and I think the two things that are of particular interest and concern to me are around the transport and what we can do about sustainable and active travel. And Councillor Farquhar's already raised that. It's always been a really congested area, and and there's more and more happening there. So how we can cope with intensifying the site. But I think it's really important that we move this forward. We're not in a position to do that ourselves. I think we still are a significant partner, I hope, with the university and with the hospital in moving this agenda forwards, and that's key. And then the other element is that as was raised in the video around heat networks, and it's something that we've been talking with the hospitals around for some time, and looking to can we do something in the centre of Poole, which will also include Poole Hospital for the reasons that Stuart Lane in the video highlighted. It needs a grouping, and again the Wessex Fields and the work the hospital can do there will be useful for Littledown swimming pool, and hopefully other businesses in that local area. And it's great to have seen the letters from the businesses locally that we were worried about in terms of whether they were in tune with the idea. I am worried about congestion continuing and locking that area up, and it's something that I think we will need to work very closely with not just the hospital but all the other business in that area to try and combat it as we go forwards. But welcome it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, Wessex Fields, when I was in the previous administration, 2019-20, took up a lot of discussion, a lot of time, a lot of energy in 2019-20 from the Cabinet then, and about what the options were for the site and what could be done for it, the different proposals, and what would then be what would be the best option for BCP Council for the Wessex Fields site. And now in this administration, to see this proposal, I can't imagine a better use of this site. I can't imagine a better option, not just looking at for BCP Council and the financial side of things, but actually for the residents of BCP who are here to serve. I cannot imagine a better use of this site. I'm pleased to have been aware of the sort of One Dorset pathology hub that's been developed, and I've been invited to the opening, the sort of launch next month. And that is a great innovation which is going to have real benefit for people, not just in BCP but right across Dorset. And I see that as the sort of first step of this entire sort of development of that whole site. What struck me in the video, as somebody mentioned about this, is a unique opportunity at this point in time, and I think we really need to grasp it, because this is for the long-term benefit of all residents of BCP in securing better health facilities and better health and wellbeing for everybody. I'm a member of the Integrated Care Partnership, and I attended a meeting there a couple of months ago. There was a discussion there, a presentation about the real difficult issues about key worker and affordable housing for NHS staff. And I spoke then to say it's really incumbent on all partnerships, all partners within the Integrated Care Partnership, to do whatever we can to improve delivery of key worker housing, to secure the staff for this area, and to facilitate better health and wellbeing for all of our residents. And rather than those sorts of meetings being talking shops, we really it's really important that we move those sort of strategies and discussions into action. And I see this as a real tangible way of actually living up to our part in that integrated care partnership and delivering on what our partners need and doing what we can to help them. So I see this as a real important area of actually having those discussions and now taking those decisions to move it into action to actually make a real difference for our residents. So I really welcome it. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Is there anybody else wanting to speak on this? Or are we all violently in agreement? Okay, so everybody who wished to speak has now spoken. We have a very simple recommendation before us on item 7, and we have to decide whether to approve the direct sale or to approve the disposal by way of an open process, and it's our recommendation to council. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for all those in favour of option 1, which is the disposal of the land directed to UHD NHS Foundation Trust. So all those in favour of option 1? That is unanimous, which means we don't need to go to option 2. So next step is the 23rd of April full council. That will be the final step, and then I hope we can just progress this as quickly as possible. Thank you so much for coming in. You are very welcome to stay and be here for the rest of cabinet if you wish, or you can go and get on with doing your more important jobs, which is running the health service.
Can I just say a very big thank you and see you soon.
Thank you. I'll just give you a moment to leave before we go on to item 8. Okay, so agenda item 8, which is the transformation programme update. This is going to be proposed and presented by Councillor Hannah. Councillor Hannah, do you have a seconder?
I'm very happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. So over to you, Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to introduce the report, which is very much a summary of what has been achieved and a look towards the future. Can I start by thanking Ms. Lacey, who's been heading the programme of late, and to her officers for all the work that's been undertaken that has brought things to the current stage, and for the thoughts looking forward. I'd also like to thank those councillors who've contributed through the Transformation Working Group, which has seen some in-depth exploration of a range of aspects of the programme, and thank you to them for their comments. The report demonstrates the good progress that's being made on all elements of the programme. In terms of the 3 main elements, all of the key technical elements of the organisational design are now in place. There are some good data use cases in housing and insurance services. The focus for the medium term is now working to the way in which our systems enable residents to access our services. The initial phase of the where and how we work element is now complete, and the focus is now on 4 key areas. Those are modernising the civic centre itself, moving on with identifying those properties that are surplus to requirements and vacating these, providing our services to residents through appropriately located community hubs for face-to-face interactions, and reviewing our depots and establishing a fit-for-purpose operational hub. The supporting our colleagues element continues with further development of our people strategy, a new recruitment system having been implemented, a leadership development programme having been put in place, and the development of performance management being an ongoing focus. The pay and reward strategy to harmonise job descriptions, salaries and benefits across the council is continuing, with unions having been balloted, having not yet both accepted the proposed arrangements and negotiations continuing. Lastly, if I can refer Cabinet to the financial summary in Appendix 3, that sets out the detail there. The overall transformation program is now at the start of its 5th and final year, and the Transformation Board is now beginning to plan for the completion of the final elements of the program. And I'm grateful to officers who stand by for any detailed questions. I move the recommendation, which is that we note the progress made. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So do we have anyone outside of Cabinet wishes to speak? I have Councillor Canavan and I have Councillor Farquhar. This hasn't been to scrutiny. Councillor Bartlett has it, so there's nothing to report from scrutiny, I don't think. So if you do want to speak in a personal capacity, I'll bring you in after Councillor Canavan and Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted, if I may, to just speak to the paragraphs 14 through to 16. I'm not going to say anything about pay and reward. I'm going to save that for another day. And I'm going to try really hard to put my patient head on about 14, 15 and 16. The two things about the surplus corporate properties and the community hubs seem to me to be quite closely linked. And I think the work that the Asset Disposal Working Group has been doing has been really valuable, actually. I did wonder what I was letting myself in for when I went on it, but I think the work it's been done, as we've discussed it with the previous item, it is actually really helpful. And somebody was kind enough to send me a list of all of the properties that BCP owned throughout the conurbation. It was quite a long list, actually. And of course, there is this question then, isn't there, about, well, what process is there to decide something is surplus? And then, secondly, what do you do with it after that? But the community hubs thing, I think, is a really important bit of work. And, this whole issue about co-locations and libraries and day centres and, what are we going to do in terms of trying to provide a more combined service for the residents, I think is really important. And this is where the impatient bit comes in, Chair. That the paper talks about a community hub work stream and about taking 12 months and an initial focus on Kinson, which I understand the reasons for, but I really, really worry about the length of time this is going to take. I really don't want to be, it's not up to me obviously, but I really don't want to be here in 2 years' time talking about the same stuff. So if there is anything that we can do to move this forward, and I was just wondering, Chair, whether it might be possible within a reasonable period of time to actually map out what it is we want to do, so that you actually got some kind of clear plan and a clear timeline, which it is, and everybody's kind of, has in their mind. So my worry about all of this stuff is it's a little bit invisible. We kind of know it's going on in the background, but we can't see it. And that's always a little bit, well, it's frustrating for me. I mean, I'm only talking for myself, but that I think would be really helpful. So if within that initial period we could do that, at least then we've got an ability to be able to say, well, all right, it might take us, after the 12 months, it might take us another year, but we know what it is we're going to do within that time frame. I hope that makes some kind of sense, but I think it would be really helpful if it's possible to have a bit more of a specific plan with some kind of timelines behind it. Thank you very much.
Councillor Earl is going to respond to that in a moment. I want to get Councillor Farquhar first so that we can then move to the Cabinet discussion. So Councillor Farquhar, you wanted to speak on this one?
Yes, indeed, Leader. Thank you, Granny. So I was pleased to see that in this report, item 12 as regards the disability audit, and I would echo my group leader's views as regards the customer interface. So I was really pleased to see that the disability audit has been completed and plans are afoot to make us accessible and to make the necessary and appropriate adjustments for those that have accessibility needs, whether through disability or whatever. But we must never forget that actually we're here to serve our residents and make sure that our democracy is open and transparent, which includes making sure that anybody who wishes to participate a committee meeting or full council has that availability without it having to be a long drawn out pre-booked exercise to actually allow them access to the building where decisions are made on their behalf. But what I wanted to bring to the table here is that, having worked previously in ERP, enterprise resource planning, I have some understanding of the difficulties of introducing new software and the process of change. I wanted to bring from the residents' point of view and from members difficulties that with the actual reporting portal itself, and the fact that there isn't a mechanism to report issues or a mechanism to actually feedback as regards how it can be improved. What I'm primarily concerned about is that there is a degree of tweaking whereby members and more importantly the members of the public are frustrated that it is not an easy solution. All three towns, previously the three boroughs, had an off-the-shelf solution. What we have here is to my understanding, a KPMG package which is constantly being adjusted, but it doesn't allow a user face which encourages members of the public to report the simple things which are important to them, such as their traffic lights are out or there's a poo bin that's not being emptied, without going through quite a lengthy process. But what I wanted to highlight is that as a member, I've been reporting these issues through the mechanism, and I'm not getting anywhere to sort of highlight that the fact we are losing our faith in our customer base, e.g. our residents, in being able to report such things as graffiti, fly tipping, important things which are important to our residents. So therefore our statistics, if that's one of the mechanisms, are showing a very different picture to what's actually happening on the streets. And all members here, I'm sure, will agree that we want to encourage our residents to be able to report these issues. So my request would be for the portfolio holder to allow that avenue so that recommendations can be made to say, this isn't working, this is failing us, and to have that fixed. And perhaps even consider for a customer interface, an off-the-shelf solution might actually be something that can be tacked on rather than something which is part of the bigger beast of the ERP, because I think, as ever, the customer interface, e.g. our residents and visitors to our town, is one of the most important portals to be able to communicate to the local authority, or as they perceive it, the council. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Farquhar. So I'm going to go to Councillor Earl because she's, oh, sorry, Sharon. Councillor Carl Brown, would you like to come up? Oh, and sorry, we're all going crazy now. Then we've got Councillor Bartlett. Sharon, you're first, ladies first.
Thank you very much, Leader. I just wanted to, I want to echo both things that have just been said to some degree. I think reporting has actually improved in some respects, and I think it's got worse in other respects. And I'm quite interested in the UX that's carried out with that reporting function, because I'd really love to be part of a working group that looked at that, quite frankly, because I do a lot of reporting. The thing I really wanted to say actually follows on from what my dear leader, as I always refer to him, said, which is, but to take it a little bit further, the local plan process that we went through and with the ward policies, I found very useful, and the time spent looking at what the wider policies would mean for our local wards and how they could be percolated into our local wards, I thought was a very useful process, and I spent some time with my local officer doing that. In terms of the buildings that we own, it would also be really useful to know which buildings in my ward, for example, that we own, and what are the strategic possibilities for some of those buildings, because you know, the whole point of being a member, you know, and a councillor is that we have some of that local knowledge. And that helps us, you know, marry the two things. We've got the high level and we've got the local knowledge. In my ward, for example, we don't have any form of community centre. Now, it may not seem the most needy place in some respects for such a thing, but that's not true. As we know, these things are, you know, we have to know about what's on the ground, what's happening on the ground, and perhaps also what's coming, what might be developing. And so it would be very useful to know what is in my ward, what are the potential possibilities. And I think perhaps a lot of other members would like that knowledge too, and to have some input and say over what might happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cobb-Brown. So I think a list of buildings by ward would be a really useful suggestion. So whoever's responsible for that would flag that somebody to pick up. Councillor Bartlett?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I think what Councillor Canavan has just said sort of touched a nerve with me, and it's prompted me to speak. I wasn't going to speak, but it was his expression. It's all a bit invisible. Well, you know, there's a very interesting expression because this is a hugely expensive programme funded by the taxpayer, of course. And even though I've been fortunate enough to be on the Transformation Cross-Party Working Group, which has opened my eyes to the transformation programme, which has revealed to me, not only through that meeting, but also through overview and scrutiny over the last few years, that we've actually now coming into a very, very successful part of the programme. Indeed, our transformation programme is what is now giving us the confidence to put forward a 4-year MTFP, the financial plan. And that's it's the success of the transformation programme that's enabled us to do that. I think it's a great shame that our residents have more visibility on the success that the transformation programme is now producing. From a resident's perspective, I think we see nothing but misery in terms of council tax and delivery and one thing or another. But I just think, from a council taxpayer's perspective, it would be great to hear a bit more about the success of this programme, this very expensive programme. That's all. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Councillor Bartlett. Okay, I think I've exhausted people who aren't on the Cabinet, so I'm going to go first of all to Councillor Earl. Thank you, Leader. And it's really good, actually. I love that we've got members coming to Cabinet and speaking up on these issues that matter to them. I think it helps with that kind of collaborative impact and making sure that we're all on the same page. So, Councillor Canavan, I think you've raised a really, really good point, and I was actually just saying this a couple of days ago to Councillor Bartlett, as in his role as Chair of Scrutiny, when we were talking about how we can best look at scrutinising the work we're doing, not just in transformation, but also the wider element of community. And what we're going to be doing is bringing forward a paper in the next couple of months to really create a bit of a framework around how we look at these elements, because like you said, the invisibility of it kind of feels like transformation's over here and the communities team are over here, and actually we've got a major amount of skills and knowledge in our communities team, and I think there's something really important around how we draw on that and make sure that we're not storming ahead with transformation without actually considering the wider impact on communities. And I would say a really important part of that is the wider councillor base and also the communities that they serve, and making sure we're not imposing, and more around how we can bring communities along with us. So it has been absolutely recognised, and my intention to bring that paper forward is actually to look a lot more in depth at how we can make sure that everyone is involved in that process. I love the idea, Councillor Carr-Brown, about having something ward-based, so we can have that kind of councillor oversight and the strategic around what services are where across BCP, but also how individual decisions will impact communities. And where we do have some of these you know, as an example, Kinson, we've got lots of different assets in one area. How can we streamline that, make it more cost effective, but not lose the amazing work that's coming from the community there? The other thing I just wanted to touch on quickly was around community asset transfer. So a lot of the work around transformation is linked to that, and how we can empower our communities to do a bit more, take on some of those assets and lead on them. So we've recently been reviewing the community asset transfer policy, and where that was kind of separated from the transformation work. The paper that's coming forward will hopefully be able to give a bit more direction to how we carry out community asset transfer. And I think, for me, I feel once we've got that pinned down, that's when we're in a position to accelerate and pick up pace on looking at every single ward, every single community, how they interact with our assets, and how we can build some really quality community infrastructure for every area that we have across BCP. So I hope that gives you some reassurance, and I'm very happy to talk about it further and in a bit more depth, and give you any information you need. Thank you. Councillor Martin, did you have your hand up? You're next.
Yes, thank you for that, Leader. Just to pick up something that Councillor Cannon, interested to know that you're called the Dear Leader. Very pleased for you. So I'm surprised it's not the glorious leader, but anyway, there we go. This issue about invisibility or visibility about transformation and the processes behind that, I completely get that, because it's one of those things that we think we know about, or maybe we don't know about it enough. Or councillors don't know about it enough, and clearly residents to residents transformation probably means nothing. So I think there is a point around that. So on that very issue, can I just remind Councillor Canavan and Councillor Carr-Brown wouldn't need no reminding, I know, about the launch of the library consultation strategy, which is a key part of this whole process of community hubs. You know, to me, it's central. So I just want to say, look, that's going to be very visible, and we can use that visibility of the library consultation strategy to open up debate about these other things as well, the community hubs. The second point I would make is in response to Councillor Farquhar about the reporting functions. All I would say is that Councillor Hannah and I have a website transformation update meeting, 2-hour meeting on Monday morning. So we certainly can raise some of those issues and probably come back to you about progress in that regard. The third point I would make is, and maybe you'd be surprised that I'm going to mention the H word, Highcliffe. So we're already, big surprise, I know, but we're already identified the BCP buildings in Highcliffe, along with other buildings, for example, the old schoolhouse, which is at the moment run by the Highcliffe Residents Association, but the parish council is likely to buy it and use it as a community building. So those discussions in our ward are already going on, and I would encourage people ward by ward to do exactly the same as Councillor Carr-Brown has mentioned. And the fourth point I would make, again, I've made it before and I'll make it again. The transformation programme is obviously it's critical. I think when this council was set up, nobody expected this process to take as long as it inevitably will take, given its complexity. But I do hope that as we are getting towards the end of that first part of the transformation programme, that, and we had conversations in other meetings this week about this very subject, that we can start seeing some of the money that's going to be acquired through asset sales being invested, not just in the council and the transformation, but into our communities. And that's something I'm sure I'll return to. But we've had a year of sorting the budget out. Hopefully we'll now have a year of consolidation. And by the time we get to 2025, hopefully it will be a year of real progress in things like investing in our communities. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, interestingly, Councillor Martin has the advantage of a parish council in Highcliffe to be able to move some of those things forward, which is something that isn't in Poole or Bournemouth. Couple of things for me. One was specifically around the Poole hub. this paper, I think the point's been well made. This is a huge project. It's nearing the end, and it has helped us enormously in terms of making our ends meet in terms of the overall procedure for the council. But sitting in Pool Hub in a meeting, gathered around a laptop because there's no projection equipment, I don't think the job is done there. And also, I remember the old Civic Centre at Pool had insulation, noise insulation, because it was on the roundabout. Well, the room 3, which is the big room at Pool, doesn't have that, and it's right on the George roundabout, and it's really noisy. So I think, particularly the Pool Hub needs more investment, but it's also very limited time open. It's limited by the library, and that was something I raised with Matty about a specific. But part of this is about the hours, and it does tie into the library strategy in terms of how we enhance the opportunities, not least for the community room that's located within the library and therefore not accessible to the community at times when they might need to use it. I think the other key thing in Pool is the lack of space for the Charter Trustees. That's again a job not done, and a real challenge for us in Pool. On page 210 talks about future projects, and this ties to something raised by Councillor Carr-Brown and Councillor Farquhar. There's a fly tipping mobile app. And I still don't understand why we're developing apps for very specific purposes. If I'm a member of the public, I don't want to be just looking at fly tipping. I want to be looking at whatever's wrong in the public space that I want to highlight to the council in a consistent and simple manner. Now, it might be there's a back end reason why fly tipping is being considered, and it might be tied in with whys. And I get there may be some specifics of the back end, but for me, it's about how do we simplify and look at the user focus for I'm in a place where there's something I think the council has a responsibility to cover. I might want to take a picture. I need to geolocate it, and I need to tell you what's wrong, and I may or may not want to tell you who I am. And that shouldn't be a concern to us. And developing an app that's about fly tipping, I just think, what is going on? And similarly with the room booking app, room booking portal for Parks and Kinston Hub. Why isn't it room booking portal for any room, or in fact a resource portal for anything that we are prepared to let people have access to? We've got to be generic. Because we've got to cover a huge amount of ground, and it still feels like we're cherry picking individual elements and not looking at how do we cover the most with the least. And in a way, as Councillor Farquhar eloquently said, that is user focused, resident focused, and supports the people who are doing it. And I did feel, looking at that list, there was an awful lot of inward looking at our HR process, looking at our own stuff, which again is important to be dealing with. But in terms of what hits us as councillors, because people can't find stuff on the website, can't work out how to report things, can't get anyone on the telephone, those are the things that actually would help us enormously in terms of the reputation of the council to be doing smarter. And then the third thing for me was on page 216. Now, our report's not quite that long. Is the expenditure on transformation, and it details the 22-23 expenditure, and then it lumps together the 23-24 and 24-25 past and future. And that's really unhelpful to me, because I thought we were at the end of the spend on the external strategic partner, KPMG, as again was mentioned. But it's in the past and future lumped in together. Why are we not showing those 2 years separate? The work still to do and the work already done. So I would be grateful if it's possible to break those out at some future point so we can see that more clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on this one? In which case, Councillor Hannah, you want to sum up or make any comments, clarities?
Whether we might want to offer the opportunity for officers to respond to any of the points made.
Yes, I can see Katie and Matty both online. Do either of you want to come back on any of the points you've heard?
Chair, it's Matty. I think there's a lot of comments made. So first of all, grateful for all that input. I think going back to the very beginning, Councillor Canavan's comments around the number of properties that we're dealing with, I think highlights the complexity that we're also dealing with and the range of service-related strategy work that's also going on along, which is why we have opted for piloting in Kinston. And that doesn't mean that I think that we can't be clearer about the direction we're going in and where we're trying to get to. But there's an awful lot of moving parts to bring together, which we hope we'll now be able to do. We've got some increased capacity to help do that. And Councillor Earl also talked about the relationship with the community side of things as well, which is really vital. So there's a lot of complexity in that area, but I take the point that the members would like to see a clearer view of the direction of travel that we're taking. Councillor Farquhar talked about accessibility, and I think you might have mentioned the accessibility audit. We're really keen to implement the outcome of the accessibility audit on the Civic Centre. Some of those things will be easy to do, and we will get on with them and do them as quickly as possible. Some of them are more complex and potentially costly. And we'll need to plan and prepare and understand the funding implications of doing those particular things as well. And finally, just Councillor Hadley's views in relation to the apps. I think it's really important, and I mean Katie might add to this as well, but that we definitely do want to reuse the technology that we create, but the initial implementation of much of it is incremental, so that we can get a piece of functionality out there. Customers can start to use it and see the benefits of it. Then when we need to use elements of that functionality again, we then reuse them. So the key one there would be mapping, so customers can increasingly see a picture of all the issues that might affect the area in which they live in, and indeed all the other reports of things in their area, not just their report, but they can start to see that other people are reporting things. So we're at the early stages of that, but hopefully as we develop it, it will start to flesh out. But it's definitely the case that we want to reuse the technology that we are implementing. One final small point, Councillor Hadley did mention audio visual in Pool Hub. Totally understand that would be really useful for community groups and members, and we have already begun initiating the implementation of that equipment into those rooms. So hopefully quite shortly you'll be able to see that new AV equipment in Pool Hub, not just in Pool Civic Centre. Thank you.
Katie, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just quickly to add, it's been quite interesting listening to some of the statements that have been made, some of which have been resolved throughout the conversation, some of which haven't. If councillors want to reach out and ask me questions directly, I'm happy to work with them. I just wanted to say, I think the next phases of the programme, now we've got those foundation technologies in place, really are looking at the improvements in terms of the citizen access to services and the website and the customer portals. And I would say also, just like to say, actually working with the transformation working group has actually been really helpful, and I've enjoyed working with that group as well to present some more of the detail on the programme to them.
Thanks, Katie. That's really helpful. I think we have sort of moved on to a much more productive, positive and outcome focused working relationship across the piece. I think, and I've just referenced to Isla, who's the Director of Comms during the meeting, about how we make sure that the public have got more access to progress that we have made. So I'm sure Councillor Martin will work with Isla to make sure that happens. So good points well made about Highcliffe having the ability as well to purchase things. Obviously, it's not just parish and town councils that can buy. There are other community groups that are in a position to do that, but those are very much in their infancy, and we have talked at length about how we enable that. So we are expecting some work to be coming forward within a couple of months, moving that forward so that communities, decision making can be done and ownership can be taken at the local space. So watch this space. That certainly is not forgotten. Councillor Hannah, back to you to sum up.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, very grateful to everyone for the comments that have been made during the course of discussion. The word impatient was used, and it's a word that I can understand, a word that I think most of us can share, and a word that may resonate a little with officers in terms of some of the discussions that have taken place from time to time. But I think it's also worth saying that a great deal has been achieved by officers over the years, and also that they are working to capacity, and therefore, whilst we can express impatience from time to time, I think we also have to be patient and allow officers to do the professional work that they're doing. So extremely grateful to them for that. The word visibility was also used, and there are some things which are more visible than others. Assets are very much visible. Community hubs, as they come through, will be very visible. IT, sadly, is not very visible. We're all sitting here with our laptops, and we make assumptions as to what they're going to do for us. But we don't pay too much attention to all the work that's gone into all this software that enables them to function. And there is a great deal of work that has gone on in our council IT systems, and Katie has led on that, and I'm extremely grateful to her and all those concerned for that work. But I'm not sure how easy it will be to make that visible to the general public. In terms of assets, going back to that, very grateful to Councillor Earl for her clarification as to what's taking place. So I didn't need to rehearse that. In terms of the suggestion for a ward-based list of properties, you've already confirmed, Leader, that that is something that would be beneficial. And I've noticed an email going through the system going towards Matty to explore how that can be made achievable. So that is one that we will be taking on board. Issues in terms of the reporting portal and Councillor Hadley's issues in terms of the pool hub. Can I say that there are inevitably going to be issues that arise that we will notice from time to time? I would extend my offer to all councillors that if they wish to advise me directly of any issues that they would like to see addressed, then please do that as and when they arise. I know that officers will have noted the ones that I mentioned today, and I know that officers are also open to direct communication. But I'm aware that some of these are things which are in the pipeline to be addressed. For example, that portal is part of the overall website review and update, which is going to take a period of time. And Councillor Martin has already alluded to the fact that we have a in-depth meeting scheduled with Matty due to take place. So that is going to be ongoing work. I think that more or less covers the comments, and I would again recommend that we note the report expressing gratitude to officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Okay, so it is just a report to note. So just want to clarify, we have agreement to note that. Yes, we do. No, no one against that. So we'll move on to agenda item 9, which is the modification to cemetery rules and regulation, which is going to be introduced and presented by Councillor Earl, and I'm happy to second it. So over to Councillor Earl. Thank you. So the purpose of this paper is to review the BCP cemetery rules and regulations and update some sections to reflect modern working practices, such as tightening up the payment terms, offering reclaimed burial space, and also to try and tackle cemeteries being used as a dog playpen by requiring owners to keep dogs on lead within them. There are 2 more changes, one that simply recognises and reflects the change in the monarch, and the other to include a clear rule and regulation on exhumation, so families, funeral directors and the council are all on the same page. I'd like to draw Cabinet's attention to recommendation C, which is an amendment to regulation 3, section 3.12. It reads, single or bulk purchase of graves by funeral directors, arrangers, or religious or non-religious faith group representatives to their group members or family members they represent will not be permitted. Now, the bereavement team and I have been backwards and forwards on this recommendation change for a while, whilst I've been speaking to the various religious communities about their needs, especially when a burial is required as soon after death as possible, and how we can both facilitate that within our cemeteries, but we also make sure we're safeguarding against organisations potentially selling on graves for a higher cost than which they were purchased for from us. The initial wording in the rules and regulations document, when it was last consulted on and when it last came to Cabinet, which was in 2022, was not to include the word not in that paragraph, and therefore permitting bulk purchases of graves by religious organisations.
When the rules and regulations were then published after Cabinet, the word had appeared, which, although it's a really tiny word, disrupts the ability for some of our faith communities to carry out their religious practices in the ways that they had previously. It's my view that we need to consult with those communities affected by the change to understand as a Cabinet what the impact will be of changing this process, and also to try and find a solution so that we can safeguard residents of BCP whilst also facilitating the burial practices of a wide variety of faiths. Because of that, I'm going to propose to amend the Cabinet paper to delete recommendation C, and we will come back to discuss it following engagement with our faith communities. I'm very happy with the other proposed changes, so we'll propose the remaining recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Earle. Is there anybody wishing to speak on this that's not Cabinet? Councillor Farquhar, up you come. There's some spaces at the table. You could just sit down there for the rest of the meeting if you like.
Saying greatly, Leader. I really would sort of welcome this paper because it's had some clarification, but I just wanted to give you some feedback from East Cemetery, otherwise known to locals as Kings Park Cemetery, which borders on the edge of my ward, as regards how the users, how the residents actually use that cemetery, which is in some cases outside of the scope of the rules and regulations which we have here. First of all, I want to sort of compliment on the branding, which I think is transformed across all the cemeteries across the 3 towns. It's very good branding. The first thing which I wanted to talk about was the opening hours. Many of the residents, I have an estate which borders directly onto one of the side gates of the cemetery, use the cemetery for their relief from isolation, individuals, etc., not necessarily visiting, a particular grave. They use it for their daily exercise, sometimes multiple times of the day. We have school children use it as a cut through and a change of scene, and also commuters will actually, for their active travel, will walk through the cemetery. We have a good advantage that East Cemetery has good biodiversity. But I just wanted to share about the view that the hours of opening are from 9 till 5 during the winter and 9 till 7, so sort of daylight hours, is that we're keen to encourage that the cemetery workers that are responsible for opening and closing the gates don't work on a work to rule, because the reason for that is because it does cause a bit of a disruption to those residents, whereby they expect to see the sort of gate at 8:30 because that's when on such and such a week that particular team member opens up the gates as they come to work, etc. So they've no problem with that, and they really appreciate the fact that the signage has gone up to set that expectation that children can't use it as a cut through to their school, obviously now, on confidence. And the reason why that's important is because if people had used that particular gate or had used that particular gate, the alternative gate to gain access is half a mile walking down through the estate and swing round. So that's important to the residents which are bordering it. The other bit of feedback is that, and again, I touch on biodiversity, is the encouragement of biodiversity. I have residents that visit daily for the wildlife, in particular foxes, within the cemetery, to the point whereby the foxes now expect that daily visit and the reduced pork pie or whatever it is that's been purchased. But the point which I'm trying to make is that the cemeteries are somewhere where many of our residents bordering cemeteries take advantage of it for other reasons than visiting, the graves of those that have departed, or the plots for cremations. And the request is to increase the diversity offering. So such things as bird boxes, bat boxes, facilities for feeding of birds, perhaps, butterfly diversity, etc., so that they are a place that people can have a little bit of time out in their day, whether they're commuting to work or just because the isolation is such. So that would be kind of a request to perhaps partner with such as Parks in Mind, etc., to allow the cemeteries to be considered as another natural green space, other than just for the purpose of, visiting those that departed. So I said that I'd raise that when the appropriate moment came up. The other thing which I wanted to point out was, and it's something which I embrace greatly, is the fact that in Bournemouth we didn't manage to be able to take our dogs and family members to visit the graves of those departed, whereas Poole we did. So I really appreciate the fact that now in Bournemouth we can have our dogs. I've received some degree of feedback as regards those which abuse that, and Councillor Earl pointed out as a large sort of play park for unattended dogs, to the point whereby the residents were placing their own no dogs stickers on. And I've had several requests to make sure that it is communicated that the fact that dogs need to be on a lead and under control and be respectful to those that may have their departed interred within the cemetery. So my request is on the signage is not unlike perhaps the our seafronts, etc., where we've got the bylaws, is that in particular to parks, we give some consideration to make sure that dog owners are aware of the reasons why dogs need to be on leads, the impact that they have to other users, whether they be there for exercise or contemplation or to visit those that are departed. So it's just a consideration that in the excellent sort of signage and the branding that we have is a consideration, rather than just dog on lead sign, to have a list of why it is that dogs can't exercise in that particular area. And I think that'll be very beneficial to calming the relationship for those that are actually being responsible for their dog and it within the cemeteries, and those that are unfortunately are allowing their dogs to roam free with the local residents, or those that are using the cemeteries for other purposes than walking their dogs. So that would be my request, is that consideration is given, not dissimilar to the seafront, an explanation why dogs have to be on leads at the entry points. And that sort of, not a garish sign, but just explains the reason why those regulations are in place. So I said that I'd raise that on behalf of the residents. So appreciate the opportunity to give that feedback. Thank you, Granny.
Councillor Carl-Brown.
Thank you very much. This gives me an opportunity to raise something which I did attempt to raise by email, but clearly sent it to the wrong person. So the part of the, it's about dogs. Part of the recommendation is around allowing dogs in, which is welcomed, particularly talking about North Cemetery. However, the poo bin outside North Cemetery was removed several months ago, and there is an uptick, shall we say, in fouling in that area. That has been reported to me. And so if we are going to allow dogs to appropriately use the space of the cemetery, can we please have enough bins?
Thank you, Councillor Carl-Brown. So I don't think anyone outside of Cabinet has expressed an opinion. I'm going to speak next, that's right, Councillor Earl. A couple of minor things, because I think it's really good to have this clarified and harmonised, and I didn't realise that you weren't able to take your dog in Bournemouth previously. I know that my dog enjoys going to visit my mum's grave, although it's not in BCP, but it's something that we do regularly, and it's a lovely place to spend quiet time. I've got a couple of sort of just queries on things that just feel a bit like, not very 21st century. The first is the hours of burial, that only burials with a religious expedient requirement can take place on Saturday and Sunday, if practical, although burials will not be permitted to take place on Sunday, which is a bit of a contradiction in terms. But actually, so many families travel an awful long way for a funeral. And whilst I totally understand there are staff issues and it may be difficult for staff, being able to, willing to work on a weekend, it doesn't really feel very modern to say you have to have a funeral during the week. And I don't see why somebody that has a religious expedient requirement is able to have that, but somebody who doesn't isn't able to. So I would like to think that if there may be a premium price for a weekend burial because of the additional costs of staff, but it doesn't feel right to me that those of us that don't have a religious expedient can't actually allow our families to have a suitable time to have that. So I'd really like to think that that's something that could be considered. The next one I'm slightly sort of perturbed by, and this was actually inspired by a film I saw recently called, I think it was called Mother's Day, where children who had lost their parents had taken themselves off to their mum's grave on Mother's Day. It's a beautiful film, but very soppy, so you needed tissues. But the paper here says that children under the age of 12 aren't allowed in the cemetery without a responsible adult. And whilst I completely agree that children who are there for recreation shouldn't be hanging around in our cemeteries, there are very good reasons why children who are bereaved might want to be in our cemeteries to be close to the person they've lost. And they're not 12. There's an awful lot of children that are very independent. And I just worry that that isn't necessarily a very compassionate statement to be making. So, you know, that might feel a bit odd, but I just think it's a little bit tough. The other one, which I know one person's appropriate is another person's tacky, but this paper makes it clear that we expect natural flowers and natural memorials isn't the right word, natural things to be placed on graves and not non-natural things. And I'm assuming we're talking about you know, plastic flowers and other things that might go there. And I don't know whether our signage is very good, but typically you go to these places and there's an awful lot of things that would be against what I presume are already in the guidelines. And I just wonder whether we could be a bit stronger about the reasons why some of those things aren't appropriate, particularly if we're encouraging biodiversity, because, you know, those foxes and other animals are going to be eating those things, and they're not going to be, it's not always that easy for our staff to avoid them when they are mowing. So, and the final thing I just wanted to say is there's nothing in here about the costs, or I would hope to think lack of cost, for the burial of an infant, because I think in most places the burial of an infant isn't chargeable. And because we say in here that we're charging double for a non-resident, it would, I think, be good if we clarified whether we make no charge for an infant or a reduced charge for a child. I don't know what the rules are, but a parish council I visited recently that sets their own burial fees was very clear about the costs for an infant or a child as opposed to an adult. I just that wasn't clear in this. I didn't know if we had it. So now I've cheered you all up. Anyone else got comments? Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, I just think wanted to respond really to Councillor Farquhar's issue around dogs, and I think, you know, part of that is it's a much wider problem than just in burial grounds, and particularly when you're thinking about biodiversity and ground nesting birds. And there has been an explosion in the number of people who keep pets. I think it's about 15% more people post-COVID during the COVID period that got pets. And it's a general education piece that, you know, that your freedom for your dog actually has an impact on other people, whether they're sitting having a picnic or whether they are mourning their loved one in a graveyard, or whether they are wildlife that's getting impacted. So I guess there's probably some wider messaging we need to do in addition to what we do specifically around graveyards, in terms of trying to get people to be responsible with their pets. Where possible. I think the other issue with foxes in graveyards is they dig. So there maybe is an issue about encouraging foxes in graveyards. Yeah, just thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hadley. Anybody else? I'm wondering whether you want to respond to some of those questions, or whether you would like Liz to do so.
Thank you. I've made notes of them all, so it's really useful to hear that feedback, especially around the biodiversity, because it's quite difficult where we are at the moment with, you know, we have things like maintenance in our cemeteries is something that is quite a controversial issue. Some people want to see the grass grow, some people don't, and it's trying to get that balance really to make cemeteries lovely places to visit, but also try and make sure that they're also going to respect the fact that there will be mourners there, and recognizing those different uses for the cemeteries I think is really important. But we, you know, as a burial authority, we have a lot of legal duties to our cemeteries, so it's working out where that fits within the rules that we have. I have made notes of everyone else, but I've just seen Liz Hall, who is our head of bereavement services, care services, is keen to come in. Hi, Liz.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Councillor Earl. Kate, before I go over the items that I want to clarify, is there anything you want to specifically address from the comments that have been raised?
Hello, everybody. Yeah, just to come in and echo Councillor Earl's comments and Councillor Farquhar's comments about biodiversity within our cemeteries. We absolutely see them as key strategic green space corridors, and will very much align within our green infrastructure strategy. So improving habitat and biodiversity gain within those sites is a clear commitment from us going forward. So we will be picking that up and working across teams to bring improvements forward there. In relation to the question about the removal of a dog waste bin, I will take that one back. We are phasing out dog waste only bins. There is no need to separately collect waste following changes in our waste collection arrangements, but that does mean that we can replace it with a dual purpose bin if it's deemed to remain a suitable location. So I'll take that one away. Thank you.
Liz, back to you on the specifics.
Okay, thank you. Just a few things I'd like to kind of clarify, and it was very interesting to hear some of the comments that have been raised by councillors on behalf of the residents. One in particular is obviously regarding the opening hours now, and obviously the locking of the gates. So not all our 9 cemeteries have lockable gates. Some are, with regards to the East Cemetery in particular, has to be secured because we have the mortuary that's located within East Cemetery. And obviously within the mortuary, we store deceased that come into our care. So there's obviously an element of security involved with that particular cemetery. There's also antisocial behaviour that we need to take into consideration as well. Unfortunately, cemeteries can be hubs for certain antisocial behaviour. We've experienced this in 1 or 2 of our cemeteries, which has then led to us having to close certain pedestrian gates and restrict certain access. As Kate's has already mentioned, you know, the cemeteries are an ideal open green space for residents and members of the public to exercise, and we all know the benefits of exercising in open spaces to mental health. So it's something we obviously try to positively encourage, as well as biodiversity. With regards to the dogs, yes, we are working on improving the signage and notices, but I also take on board with regards for some further information relating to why we insist on having certain controls in place. So that's something I will certainly take on board and move forward with the teams to improve with across all our cemeteries. We have recently improved the signage, but with that feedback we've just received, that's something that we need to work on and to improve even further. So thank you for that. With regards to the weekend burial side of things, like our cremation services, it's something that we are very, very keen to promote and to offer more to our families. But as Councillor Slade has already mentioned, it does depend on having, at the moment, the members of staff available at weekends to provide that services. So that's an ongoing matter that we will be discussing as part of business improvements and evolving the service moving forward into the future. With regards to children, it's very, very good point. So I'm sure some of you are aware of the Children's Funeral Fund. So our actual price list does go into a lot of detail with regards to the Children's Funeral Funds, and any child that is either cremated or buried within our bereavement sites do not get charged for this. Directly through the family appointed funeral director. So I think that's something we definitely need to factor in within our cemetery rules and regulations, and I take that point on board, and we'll look at doing that moving forward. So I'm assuming, Kate, that we'd have to bring that modification back to Cabinet on Children's Funeral Fund. Are we going to include that in our modification version of cemetery rules and regulations?
Thanks, Liz. Go on, Kate.
It was just in relation to that. I'm sure we'll work it through with Democratic Services on appropriate process.
Okay.
Sorry, Liz, there was something else you wanted to add?
No, I think that was it. That was very, very useful. So thank you very much for that feedback. That's been most useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to pass back to, is nobody else is indicating. So I'm going to pass back to Millie for any summing up before we move on.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to get those points raised, and this policy now is 2 years old, and it's really looking at that update in the context of where the council is now, and things have changed, especially around the way we work. And I think this is a bit of an opportunity to look at some of those policies that maybe we do want to update. And like I said, we do need to look at that 3.12 regulation that will be coming back to Cabinet for a decision. But perhaps there's an opportunity there that if we do want to update anything else within our rules and regulations, we can include it when it comes back then. So yeah, thank you for the comments, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so we have some decisions that we have to approve, recommending to approve the updated sections with the removal of regulations section 3.12, which is item C. So all those in favour of the amended paper? That is unanimous. We've just lost Councillor Wilson, so just need to note that that's 7 in favour and 2 not voting. Yeah, we are 2 hours in, so I'm going to propose before we move on to item 12, we don't have too long to go, that we just take a 10-minute comfort break. So we'll return at, well, we'll make it 12:30. That gives us long enough to get outside. So if we return to 12:30 and see you in a moment. Okay, welcome back to the April Cabinet meeting. We are now moving on to agenda item 10, which is the future of public health in BCP Council. This paper is going to be, thank you very much, introduced by Councillor Brown and seconded by Councillor Burton.
So I'm very happy to second it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dedman has requested to address the item, and we will be taking, before Councillor Dedman, Councillor Canavan as the chair of adults scrutiny. So I'm going to pass over to Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, this report on the future of public health in BCP Council. Currently, Public Health Dorset operates under a shared service agreement between BCP Council and Dorset Council. But under BCP Council's corporate strategy, there are opportunities to better discharge our public health functions outside of this shared service agreement. So the report before us proposes the termination of the shared service agreement and a programme to shape the future public health function. And this is to support the delivery of BCP's council vision and ambitions around health and wellbeing. When I've been in meetings across the country with councillors and representatives from other areas, there are a whole mixture of public health arrangements for councils across the country. Some have shared arrangements. Some, often much smaller authorities, have their own public health structure and their own director of public health, and some of those actually are directors of public health within their authority, but other areas as well. So there are a mixture of arrangements, and we're looking at changing the arrangements as detailed in the paper. It's not a case of us walking away from working across Dorset, and hopefully members have seen in paragraph 6 and 9 particularly, it talks about where some public health services are better delivered pan Dorset, and we can do this through shared arrangements. But it would be a case of sort of working that through over the coming months. And yeah, where it works, we will work with our colleagues at Dorset and work pan Dorset where maybe there's economies of scale in delivering particular services, for example. Paragraph 6 also talks about the opportunities and risks and details the 5 principles to basically mitigate those risks and make the most of the opportunities before us. Question about why to decide to do this now? Well, to be honest, we're required to give at least 6 months notice under the shared service arrangement. This will be about 12 months notice. And I think, to be honest, we do need 12 months to properly plan and deliver this and to manage that change, not least the HR implications for the staff that are working within Public Health Dorset. I think it's really important for them that they can see what decisions have been made and what the future holds for them particularly. And I think it's important to do that rather than just start talking around different options and then at the last minute give 6 months notice. I think it helps to give early notice, particularly for the staff within the public health service. I know there have been some comments from our health and adult social care review and scrutiny colleagues, and I welcome their involvement. So the recommendations before us, as well as A to D, we've also got an additional recommendation E, which I will just read out, and I'm sure Councillor Canavan will enlighten us around that. So we've got an additional recommendation E that Cabinet invites the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee to assess options for configuring public health functions within the Council's corporate structures to maximise community benefit as outlined in paragraph 5, and to report findings to the Corporate Director for Wellbeing by the end of May to inform this work ahead of any job design or appointments process. So it's to get their early involvement over the next month or two before things really start getting written down and put in print. So yeah, that's the recommendations before us, and I'll invite any sort of comments.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. So Councillor Dedman has had to leave the meeting, but she was going to speak in support of what Councillor Canavan is going to say. So therefore I'm going to pass to Councillor Canavan.
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for having me back again. So the paper that's before you, because of the timing of it, it's meant that it hasn't been through the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So what I did, and you can blame me for it. I circulated it to members of my committee and asked for their initial comments so that I could feed it back today. And one of the things that came back from that really were, firstly, a request for you as Cabinet to defer it, and that was really about just the sequence of meetings, really, because as it happens, the next meeting of the Health and Adult Social Care Overview Scrutiny Committee is a couple of days prior to the next Cabinet meeting. So I think there was a feeling that there would be then an opportunity for us to look at it, on the basis of, you know, the principle of creating our own Director of Public Health at all, you know, and to try and answer the question, which also came up in the comments, as to why are we doing this? But I think the other thing was, had we got the sequence right in terms of the way in which we should be taking decisions that are this important? I think there was a feeling that perhaps there could have been a little bit more in the paper in terms of detail as to you know, the kind of rationale, the kind of evidence behind making this kind of decision. It's not a criticism; it's just a view, which I think might have helped. So I know I ask a lot of questions here, and I know I can be a bit challenging at times. But it's for a reason, really, because I think that's what scrutiny should do. And, you know, read this paper and it just kind of sets off like a million questions in your head, really. But, you know, as I have repeatedly been told and have learned, that the benefit of scrutiny is to try and add value to decisions that are made. And if you look at the existing arrangements that are in place at the moment for public health, from my research, I've established that actually there's always been some kind of shared arrangement even in the the kind of councils preceding the merger with BCP. There's always been some kind of arrangement of that kind. So you look at the structure, don't you? What you've got at the moment, what it's doing, what the priorities are, and what the outcomes are that it's achieving. And then you ask the question, which I think is an absolutely legitimate question, of, is this delivering what we want for BCP? And if the answer to that is, well, no, it's not really, then you really, I think, in my view, just have to quantify that. You know, what is it not doing? You know, what needs to be done differently? You know, and do we actually want different outcomes? What are the outcomes that we are seeking to improve? And if you can, within all of that exercise, pull together the data and the evidence to support that, then I think that's a huge value in that, because it really, you know, it really informs the decision that you are going to do. Because what it gives you is like a long list of things to do, and then you can think about, well, how are we going to do that? And you think about the timescales and the capacity within the organisation, and then you sort of say, well, what structure do we need to deliver it? And is this job part of that answer? And I think so. That's why the question came in about how, you know, in terms of the sequence, how we got it right. You know, I've worked in and around the health service for quite a long time, and the structure is not at all straightforward. And the thing that you realise is how much joint working there is that goes on, and the more you dig, the more you realise you can't do much without that kind of joint working. And I think everything that we're doing is really positive, and all the partners that I think we work with are really positive in trying to do that. But it is not straightforward. And of course, at some point in time, if you were to go down this road, it's going to cost you money, not immediately, but it will do once you've got a new job and a structure in place. And then you think, well, you have to do some kind of cost benefit analysis, really, don't you, as to what additional value are we going to get? I'm not saying there isn't any, by the way, but I think you do need to do that work. So for me, public health is really important because, in my experience, it kind of can get put into a silo if you're not careful. And people say, "Oh, that's a public health issue." You know, we'll kind of put it over there and let the public health people deal with it. But the real strength, I think, of public health is to try and make change and to try and look at the things which impact on public health, because it's not just about medical intervention. It's also about things like poverty and deprivation and poor housing and all those other factors that kind of impact on public health. And you can if you do public health properly, it seems to me, you can begin to make real change and drive improvement into those areas that we all, I think, want to try and improve. So I really thank you for the additional recommendation. I think that's incredibly helpful for the committee. I did get the sense that there was a very great deal of nervousness about deferring it because of the loss of the time. And we're working within a fairly restricted timescale in any case. But we do. I'm sure my committee want to help to try and make this work. But I think you do have to do that process of ensuring that you're doing it right, that we get it right, and we're getting it right for the proper reasons. So that's all I wanted to say. But thank you very much to yourself, Leader, and to the portfolio leader, and to the director for your help with changing the recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Canavan, and we look forward to scrutiny taking that deep dive and helping to develop what that service is. I think you're absolutely right that we consider public health to be really important, and the opportunities public health offers us is vast and I think untapped at the moment. Councillor Carr-Brown.
Thank you, Leader. I won't keep you long. I just wanted to reiterate the points that Councillor Canavan has just made, and also welcome the additional recommendation that has been made this morning. But also, I do actually want to express my my disappointment at this paper, actually, because of the lack of information in it, frankly. I feel very unsighted about this decision. And I am always nervous about, are we answering the right question when we come up with policy, because we have a tendency to answer a different question with the things that we want to do. So the things that came to mind when I read this paper were, why are certain things why do we not have the levers that we might have within the current contract, that we need or we want to have within the current contract? Has that been addressed? Why are things not already happening? This shared agreement is some years in existence. What are the examples of what isn't working and what could be done better? What is the vision for the new structure that is being asked for here? And frankly, also, what are the financials around it? What is the financial impact of the whole thing? And I didn't see any of that. So the level of importance of public health has already been stated. It's something that actually, frankly, I take extremely seriously. I've always thought it was frontline council work, and I'm very glad that public health came back into council, the remit of local councils. I think it's exactly where it should be, and so we need to do it extremely well. We've seen the terrible stories that can happen if it isn't done well. And so I completely support the idea of embedding public health into everything that we do. It's like the climate emergency. We embed that in everything that we do. So I support that principle. However, I wanted to see more of the evidence around why this is the proposal to address that principle. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carr-Brown. Okay, I've got nobody else outside of Cabinet. So anybody wish to speak on this one? Councillor Hadley and then Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I think those contributions are really helpful. I was working within the NHS when public health transitioned out of the NHS, and there was a bit of a mourning for us working in health in terms of the loss of direct contact. But it's really important in terms of those health inequalities, air quality, and all the other things, not all of which public health seem to be have capacity to deal with in the current arrangement. I'm also very much a fan of working collaboratively where we can, and working as one service across the county where it's sensible to do so. And I think, I hope that by giving clear notice of our intent, that we can work positively with Dorset Council in terms of the next steps, what we continue to do in collaboration, and reset the relationship in a way that's beneficial to both parties, rather than that we step away and they blame us for integrating the service, which would be really unfortunate. So I hope that was the intention for the work that we need to do now in order to manage a successful and sensible transition, and to imagine how we can better embed it in terms of all the other things that we need to do, because there's areas around active travel and all sorts of other bits where public health are at those meetings, but it's not front and centre of their agenda because they're trying to cover the whole county and the diversity of what we need against what the rural communities need. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of observations and a question, really. About 2 hours ago, we made a decision about University Hospitals Dorset, which is all about collaboration and the exciting opportunities around that. And 2 hours on, we're looking at sort of decoupling in another health environment, which I'm not entirely convinced about that at this moment in time. And it's certainly just reading what we want to do with this, which is putting public health, to quote the report, putting public health more strongly at the heart of the council strategy and aspirations. It's not entirely clear to me how why we can't do that with the existing arrangements. And I think going back to the UHD thing, we can see from the presentation there and everything around the Wessex Fields site, the opportunities there. I'm still not clear reading the report. Only read it last night. Not clear about what these opportunities are that will help us put public health more at the centre of what we're doing. So I think I just wanted to make that point, because I think that's really important. And if you look at, somebody else made the point about collaboration. We've got the ICBs, collaboration in all sorts of other ways in health. And yet this seems to be going in the opposite direction. There may be some very good reasons for that, but I can't quite see them at the minute. My questions really are, what is the view? Obviously, there's been discussions with Dorset Council. What is the view of Dorset Council on this? And equally, what is the view of the DHSC? Because I obviously know, I think it's in paragraph 8. Anyway, somewhere it talks about there are risks in this, and the only risk it identifies is withdrawing funding if public health money isn't seen to be delivering properly. But the report mentions risks plural. I wondered what those other risks are, and whether the DHSC has offered a view about this proposal. Thank you.
Right, before I bring Councillor Brown back to, or Gillian back to respond specifically, is there anybody else that's got any questions about it? Okay, Councillor Wilson.
I don't specifically at the minute, but I just want to hear the responses and then kind of maybe come in.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, and thanks, Patrick, for your input to this. You're quite right. There are very complex structures within the health sector, and I've become aware of those in 10, 11 months in this role, particularly. This proposal, this decision doesn't change the fact that we will still continue to work jointly with NHS partners right across the healthcare service. That's always going to be key to achieving any of the sort of health and wellbeing outcomes that we've got in our sort of vision and ambitions. We can't do that on our own as a council. But those structures have changed a lot in the last couple of years through the new integrated care system with the integrated care board and the integrated care partnership, which I attend and sit on. And those structures, there can be those sort of meetings can be long and can feel quite bureaucratic, but I think they are really sort of building up relationships and commitments from different partners in particular key areas. So those relationships with our partners and with Dorset Council to attend those partnership meetings as well will continue, and I think we'll get stronger within the new integrated care system structure. This proposal really is to give public health a much stronger focus within BCP Council, so that it's not, oh, that's a service that we share with Dorset and that delivers this, that, and the other. So it has a sense of delivering things outside of the council's normal structures, as opposed to really being integrated within council structures at BCP and working across directorates to actually have public health considered and as part of all of the sort of directorate and all of the services within BCP. And I think that's really where this is aiming to get to. Public health is really important, as has been said, and I think especially in, and I don't like the phrase, but getting upstream and actually being a preventative service that not only delivers better outcomes and addresses health inequalities for our residents, but actually reduces the pressure on the health service and our health service partners overall if we can get it right. And I see this as being able to focus this service much more within BCP's own structure, actually will help our prevention agenda. You know, discussions in adult social care, we often talk about the sort of prevention agenda and why we need to work on reablement and other areas. I think it will help having public health Dorset within our structures, that officers can work within the authority to really deliver on that prevention agenda, to help across health, help across social care, help across children's services, leisure services, whatever it is. There are already some differences in the service delivery within this shared arrangement that we've got. BCP Council currently retains its drug and alcohol funding within public health from the public health grant to deliver those services ourselves, and similarly with Dorset, there are some sort of differences within it, but I think this is all about giving it a much stronger internal focus and link within our organisation, without losing that partnership working with our NHS partners. And I think that there needs to be a lot of work and thought consideration to make sure that, as I mentioned, I think you're right, in paragraph 8 it talks about the risks, it talks about the principles that we're going to follow to mitigate those risks and make the most of the opportunities. And I think the involvement of overview and scrutiny is going to be important in that, to actually really help us think through those sort of risks and what we need to do to sort of manage that. So yeah, unless anybody else, unless Julie wants to.
Julie, did you want to add anything?
There was a question about the DHSC and their position on it. Obviously, the DHSC and the Secretary of State for Health have a very strong interest in how public health functions are delivered, and there's a framework around that. We've had early conversations with the regional representatives in OHID, and in fact we raised our consideration of making this step at an assurance meeting that we had earlier on this year, and we've had some further conversations with them. They will want to work very closely with us in this next phase on the detailed design, because the devil is in the detail, as I think the comments that councillors have been making have revealed, and we welcome their involvement in doing that. They will want to be assured that we are continuing to make good use of the public health grant. I think we will be able to demonstrate that. Indeed, we'll be able to demonstrate ways in which embedding public health in the context of the council strategy will actually get more bang for their buck. We have to demonstrate that as we work through the detail, of course. So they want to work with us. They're not parties to this shared services agreement, so they're not required to agree or disagree with this particular decision that's before Cabinet today, but we will work very, very closely with them in the next stages, and indeed with the additional recommendation as part of that scrutiny process, if that's what scrutiny wish to do as well.
Councillor Wilson, did you want to come in?
Well, no, I think it was kind of helpful from Councillor Brown and Gillian in kind of addressing some of the queries I had. I mean, I think that it's not necessarily. I think it's potentially a sensible idea, this, because I think the challenge is that a built-up urban conurbation have in terms of public health compared to a rural area are very different. So you would expect the services to be different. And also, I mean, it feels like there's going to be that extra layer of scrutiny. So we can go through and as Janine said, it's that devil in the details. So I think that if this is the way we want to go forward, I think we need to be stating that intention early on and going through that process. So yeah, I think that's been quite helpful. That summary. So thank you.
So if it's okay, I'll just come in and say actually the conversations about so I would flip it on its head. From what's been said is, well, why would we want to break it apart? I would put into, well, what is the benefit of it being together? Because actually, when I've looked at other places, if you take somewhere like Southampton and Portsmouth, both unitary authorities, half the size of BCP, have their own individual directors of public health. North Somerset, that I was in a couple of months ago doing a peer challenge, less than half the size of BCP, sit as part of Somerset, have not only their own Director of Public Health, but their Director of Public Health is the Director of Public Health and Regulatory Services. So it's completely embedded into their council. And yet they are still part of the Somerset ICS, they are still part of their wider health network. My personal experience over the last 9 months of being back in this role is that we do not have an embedded public health service. We do not see the directors of public health, the deputy directors of public health attending all of the meetings that we would expect them to. Last week, we had a really important children's services improvement board with a paper from public health, and nobody from public health actually attended the meeting, even online. And that to me is not acceptable, and it would not happen if those teams were integrated completely within this organisation. David and I have to attend a joint public health board meeting once a quarter in Dorchester to basically talk about the same stuff that's going to come straight back and be talked about at our health and wellbeing board, just so that we can fulfil the tick the box of a joint public health board. So I would flip it and say, where's the benefit? Where there are benefits in working across the area, that would be picked up by the ICS or by the Integrated Health Partnership or whatever. But actually, the needs of our population are quite different, and there will be opportunities for them to work together. And we work together with other people, even when we don't have a shared service. So to me, it's like, why are we staying in a partnership that is there because that's the way it's always been? Dorset went their own way with Tricuro, have set up their Care Dorset. They've gone their own way with their revenue and benefits service. I think, we've made clear, certainly myself and Graham, from over the last 9 months, have said, actually, how is this benefiting the people of BCP? Let's look at that. And if it benefits us to be together, then great. But so far, there don't seem to be clear benefits. There may well be slightly higher costs in having our own service. I think that's to be explored, and over the next 9 to 12 months that will all become clear. But actually there is a cost benefit analysis, and it shouldn't always be about the cheapest service, it should be about the right service. So I think starting this process is what we're doing. We have to give notice that it's our intention. That feels like the right thing to do, but I think scrutinising it from every angle and making sure we end up with a really great service for our residents is the right way forward. And I look forward to the deep dive that Health Scrutiny will inevitably undertake. Councillor Burt.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And just following up from what you were just saying, because my thoughts were coming around to exactly the same. There are advantages and disadvantages about looking at something as large as a Pan-Dorset agreement, and we have several of them. However, it makes it much more difficult to be more bespoke to what is needed for our residents, and BCP is very different to Dorset. Coming to the children's bit, I would love public health to focus a little bit more on children and young people. And at the moment there is some work there, but I don't feel it's enough. And the children and young people in BCP are quite different to the children and young people in Dorset. Our service is in a different place. And I think we need something slightly different from it. Now, I totally agree. We don't want to throw away the good bits of working together with Pandorset, but I do feel, as I said, we could build something a bit more bespoke to our residents, looking at the possibility of splitting it off.
Okay, so anybody else? Oh, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, David. Yeah, a couple of things. One, just in terms of we have this model within our operating model around sense of expertise, sense of excellence. I've forgotten which way we're calling it these days. And there's something about career progression as well, because these are very specialist members of staff. They're highly qualified doctors, and so I worry whether we have a large enough quantum to be able to support that, and that's something I guess that will need to be looked at as part of the process. And the other is around the data analysis and visualization work, where there's a lot of information around the population which comes down from various sources. And again, so that, I think these are some of the areas that hopefully will come out in the wash in terms of thinking about the advantages of doing some of this stuff collaboratively, rather than just starting from a basis that we can all do it all better within BCP than with Dorset, because some of that may be duplication just for the sake of running our own show, and I'd find that really unfortunate if we don't recognise some of those potential challenges. Thank you.
Okay. Gillian.
I just wanted to pick up on the point about data, to mention a really helpful initiative that's been going on under the Health Scrutiny Committee over the last 6 months. A working group was formed to support the committee in thinking about the sort of data that it wanted to use to inform its agenda setting and its meetings. We've held a series of meetings bringing together data colleagues from BCP Council, from the ICB, who work Pandorset, and from the public health team, and they've been really instrumental in shaping it. What that's led to is a currently draft toolkit, which I think is a really fantastic toolkit that's going to be useful to officers, as well as I hope to the committee. The committee hasn't the working group hasn't yet signed it off, and it will go to the full committee. But just as data had been mentioned in the health context, I wanted to draw that initiative to Cabinet's attention.
Thank you, Gillian. Okay, so I think everybody's had their say. Councillor Brown, just up to you to just verify anything you need us to cover, and obviously we're then looking at 5 recommendations, aren't we?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything particularly that I need to sort of add to the discussion. It's been really useful actually. So yeah, the recommendations A to D, the key ones are obviously A, to give notice to Dorset Council with intention to terminate the shared services agreement, and C, about still working in partnership with Dorset to ensure and manage transition, as well as then the recommendation B, which I read through earlier.
Okay, so all those in favour of the 5 recommendations? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. So that takes us to agenda item 11, which is the SEND programme of expansion and special educational needs and disabilities programme of expansion for Camford Heath Infant and Junior School, which is being introduced by Councillor Burton. It does have an exempt appendix, so I do need to let people know that if they wish to discuss the appendix, we will need to go into exempt session, so be aware of that. Do we have a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thanks, Councillor Earls. Over to you, Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Will, for seconding. You'll be all aware of the BCP SEND improvement agenda. We're working to increase the number of specialist places to increase inclusion in mainstream schools. This is one of several schemes being developed, and this particular one is a result of the council working with Teach Trust to co-locate specialist places for children with speech, language and communication needs at Camford Heath Infant and Junior Schools. This will provide 35 places in total for children with EHCPs from January 2025. That is 20 infant places and 15 junior places. These places will be in addition to the current PAN of Camford Heath Infant and Camford Heath Junior School. Speech and language and communication is one of the areas that has been highlighted that we need extra accommodation. As with any EHCP based provision, the schools will take pupils from anywhere, That's across BCP and from other council areas, if that's deemed right. The cost for each pupil being funded by the local authority in the area in which they live. The paper refers to a proposal being complex scheme involving conversion of extensions of existing spaces, relocations, remodelling and refurbishing existing facilities. So I visited the school to have a look at the site and was shown where the remodelling of some areas and the rebuilding of temporary building that was way past its useful life, unless growing fungi is a good use for a school building, and the building proposed modular accommodation. In this paper is passed. I'm looking forward to visiting again in the spring, if they'll have me, to see the new facility in action. The funding is from the Council High Needs Special Provision Capital Grant allocated by the Department of Education. What this paper is asking for Cabinet to approve the project budget detailed in the exempt section at the end of the report. The project is fully funded, as I said, by the Council High Needs Special Provision Capital Grant. The facility will take pressure off the increasing high needs block budget, have the advantage of utilising existing school estate where there's already good and outstanding education provision. The infant school here last year received outstanding in all areas in Ofsted inspection last year, which is a great achievement and reasonably rare. I think there's only 4 within BCP. The project has been granted a certificate of lawfulness back in 11th of March this year. So that's the planning is taken care of. You'll see that there's a 15% contingency for design and a 5% for inflation within the budget. As I said, more details are in the exempt section if we want to look at that, although hopefully not. But I would highlight that the cost per pupil, which is in the exempt, is estimated to be under at 63,000, which is significantly below the around 75,000 national average. I'll finish by saying that I'm very excited at this project. I know there's been some frustration both within the school and BCP Children's Services that's taken a long time to get to this point. However, everything's now in place and it'll be great to get this opened in the spring.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Burton. Do we have anybody wishing to speak on this one? No. Oh, Councillor Hadley.
Just a question on the costs being less than the average nationally. I can imagine there'd be a wide spectrum of special needs, and I just wondered in terms of the case mix of the pupils that will be supported at this facility, is that a reasonable comparator? Because are we effectively below average in terms of the needs that will be met here, rather than the average needs across special school places across the whole country? Thank
you. Kathy, would you like to?
Yes, I can check on that. However, this is specifically for children with speech and language disabilities, and so therefore I am assuming that the officers have actually done that work in terms of that element, but I can check that.
Thank you, Kathy. Anybody want to speak on this one, or are we happy to go straight to the vote unless Councillor Burton wants to use his opportunity to speak a second time?
I would just add to it. Was that a little dig down?
Wondering if you were saving something for your sum up, that's all.
No, nothing particular. It's just, I mean, I would agree with what Kathy Hadley just said there. I would remind, though, of course, this is a land and building which is being partly repurposed, and therefore hopefully that will have taken the price down. We're not having to rebuild or totally build a new place, and we're not having to acquire land. And the planning application is simple because it's a certificate of lawfulness, which is taking some cost off the planning process as well.
Excellent. Well, with all that known, we vote on this one. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Brings us on to the final item, our substantive agenda, which is the Safer Routes to School Traffic Regulation Order Review. This covers quite a number of schemes across quite a number of wards. And as the end of quite a long journey for some of these schemes. So Councillor Hadley, no, is that Councillor Hadley introducing it? Yes, and Councillor Burton's going to second it because it's related to schools. So off you go, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. I think when I read the papers last night, I was thinking there might be time to actually go into a bit more detail than normal with TROs, but little did I know how long we'd take to get to this point. Yeah, as you highlighted, there's 36 different measures and in this paper, and it is quite complicated because the adverts are based on the individual road names in alphabetical order, and then the maps obviously are based in locations. And I counted about 17 locations surrounding schools, but not all actually right by schools, because in the beginning of the equalities impact assessment, it highlights that the priority lists have been come up from our road safety team, from ward councillors, from the schools themselves, from residents, from town and parish councils, from businesses, from bus operators, from the waste services and emergency services. So they are, particularly those people are out and about at times when the schools are filling up or emptying in terms of problems that they perceive. And they do cover many of the areas across the whole of the conurbation, right from Bearwood to Burton and Hilborn to Hamworthy, to name just a few of them. These were consulted on from 29th September to 20th of October. And as a result of those consultations, and again, the detail is in the report, but there were two where changes were made to the recommendations on the basis of the consultation feedback. So around Springdale First School, there were 20 representations made, 10 in support, 10 against the scheme. And as a result of that, the measures were changed to be just for school hours on one of the streets that previously had been at any time. And similarly, for the Fairmar Road area of Christchurch, there were 8 representations, 4 positive, 2 just making comments and 2 negative, and particularly on Marsh Lane, it was agreed as a result of that consultation to make the restrictions just on one side of the road rather than as planned on both sides of the roads. So there has been a review of the representations been made and some adjustments as a result. But hopefully these will help with all modes of encouraging children to be able to get to school independently, walking, cycling. For those that need transport, particularly a couple of special schools, there's some measures that I think will support the buses getting them to school, and generally to try and reduce the mayhem that we get outside many of our schools throughout the year. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, before we come to Cabinet, is there anybody, well, the 3 remaining people who are any of the Labour group wish to speak? No? Okay, just to clarify who's in the room. In which case I'll go straight to Councillor L.
Thank you. Yes, I was just going to echo what Councillor Hadley has said from my role as portfolio holder for Connected Communities, which includes the road safety element, and also as a ward councillor who has seen the progression of not just safer routes to school, but also the School Streets project around the schools in my area. And there are schools here on this list that are in Newtown and Heavlands ward, which I represent. I just wanted to really just thank the officers who have worked on the Safer Routes to School programme. I think that what's been really effective with this project is the level of engagement, and that's not just with the schools and the families and parents and staff, but also with the residents. And as much as Councillor Hadley has pointed out ones where there have been adjustments, I was quite surprised at the sheer level of support from residents on the responses that the council received back through the TRO process. I thought it was really heartening to see that even that local residents recognise the impact and are in some scenarios willing to give up space because they realise that it is dangerous for some of our children going to and from school, and we do have a duty to make it safe through using the powers we have under traffic regulation orders. So I was just to say thank you to the team, and just to say thank you for the engagement and the level of engagement that they've taken. I'm really pleased to see this come through. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Burton?
I'd just like to say I'd like to echo several things being said there. I mean, I know I spend a lot of time at school gates in one way or another, both in my roles at the moment and of course in my previous life. and I see quite close at hand what school gates can be like. It's very interesting school gates because, of course, you get this a couple of hours a day, 40 weeks of the year, when you get this huge amount of activity, and then most schools for the rest of the time in the year, the school gates are quite quiet places, and getting something balanced which actually gets the benefit of increasing safety for children and young people around school gates, making it easy for residents who live there, but not affecting the rest of the time. It is quite a balance, and I'm really pleased to see the work's gone here. I don't know all the detail of all the places. I've had a look through the report. I do know the one in Bearwood quite well, and I know the residents there will be very pleased because I know I had a lot of comments there, and I've actually personally been and watched it at the school's request to see what it's like. So I know that particular one will be received very well. And I also noticed the comments from both sides there, and the way that people have engaged in it, which I'm also very grateful for.
Okay, anybody else? I just want to say thank you for finally getting the Broadstone one over the line here. Some of these measures have been in the pipeline for quite a few years, and it's great. What I'm hoping actually that we'll see from some of these programs is more engagement then from those schools, where it's going to be those parents are going who are driving their children to school are going to have to go that little bit further because they won't be able to get right up to the school gate, and hopefully we can then encourage the schools to engage with us on more substantive programs like school streets and really good school travel planning, where perhaps they've historically been a little bit more reluctant to come to the table. So, you know, I'm hoping this will give me the opportunity when they do go in to go back to the schools and talk about how we take the next steps. For clarity, the expectation in terms of the delivery of these programs, obviously, if we approve them today, how quickly might we expect some of the lines and other things to go down so that these children can start benefiting?
Leader, I'm afraid I can't give you the detail on that. I'm not sure whether we have an officer online at the moment. Doesn't look like we do. They would probably try and do it in the school holidays. They generally try and do that sort of work outside of school term time. But it will vary, I'm sure, across the 35 measures. It's a case of when the teams are available to do the work, and indeed also I'm sure they will be thinking about if there's resurfacing or other things that will undo it as soon as they've done it. You know, they will try and avoid that because they're quite smart at trying to work that through as well.
Can I make a plea that where some of these have been in the pipeline for 3 or 4 years, waiting until the summer holidays would be seen as like really, because people do get rather frustrated that the council takes a long time. I got Amanda's going to come in on that, and then I know that Councillor Martin just wants to say something.
Thank you. Just to confirm, yeah, apologies, nobody from the team was able to attend today, but I will take that query back and also the note around the timing and make sure that everyone's updated with an accurate timeline for delivery.
Thanks, Amanda. Councillor Martin?
Just an observation which Councillor Hadley may be interested in. Cabinet passed a TRO around Highcliffe Secondary School a few months ago, and the lines went down, and that the issue around there has been resolved. Quite predictably, all the traffic has now been displaced onto the other roads around it, and you'll probably know them: Forest Way, Nada Road, because I know you know Highcliffe well. And it was just an observation that, because Leader, you mentioned about parents will have to, you know, who drive their children to school will have to park further away. They're parking in the nearest possible road, and actually it's not as dangerous as what was happening before around the school, but it's still very dangerous because people are parking on both sides of the roads, blocking drives, leaving a bit limited space for people to drive through the middle. So I think there's quite a lot of work to be done around either enforcement or education in terms of parents who still, no matter what the circumstances are, insist on bringing their children to school by car. Some don't have a choice, I'm sure, but actually it's a massive problem, and it continues to be a massive problem around that school. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. I could see Kathy Hadley nodding when we were talking about the school travel planning, so I'm hoping that's something that perhaps Councillor Burton in consultation with Councillor L might be able to progress for the next school year, because some schools are not particularly helpful in working with us. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll go back to Councillor Hadley, and then whose paper was this one? It is your paper, yeah. So yeah, you can finish off.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I was going to make reference actually to enforcement. I mean, I think it is a real challenge that it does just shift the problem. It shifts the problem further away, which reduces hopefully the density. But sometimes until a change is made, you don't know exactly how people will react to it. I was heartened by one of the comments from a parent when we looked at the school streets in Boscombe, who had said, it's a bit further away and I've decided actually it's easier to walk with my child and it's better for me, it's better for my health. It's lovely to have a chat with the kids on the walk to school without having to worry about driving. So there are people who do change their habit as a result of just a small change, but we need to help them, to encourage them to that. We in no way can we force them to do it. And then the other bit of it is enforcement against people who will park on WA lines right outside the school because they think it's their privilege, and the impact of that on other children. And I know Amanda's team have a limited resource to be able to get around the schools to actually enforce. But when there's a traffic warden, suddenly everyone behaves, and when they've gone again, they go back to their old ways. So and sadly, that will continue to be an issue, just around trying to persuade people to be sensible around schools.
So with those comments complete, can I just take a vote? All those in favour of approving the paper as tabled? Thank you very much. That takes us to agenda item 13, which is urgent decisions taken by the Chief Exec, who sat patiently through 3 hours of meetings. Do you have any decisions you've taken?
Thank you, Leader. I have 2 decisions I've taken, both to accept money. One was £286,000 of active travel capability funding, which had to be accepted within about a 2-day deadline in order to get it in the last financial year. And the other was the HR support pilots project, which is about providing from Department of Business and Trade to provide BCP-based businesses with HR support, and that was for £180,000. So collective sum of efforts, I think, is about £500,000 on 2 signatures.
Well, that was worth waiting for. And rather it was money being received rather than money being spent without. So, okay, that takes us to the last item on the agenda, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. And I know that was published yesterday because I had to look at it last night. I'll continue to push that we are looking to a 9 to 12 months forward plan. We really would ask all officers to please populate the forward plan as far ahead as you can, even if it's by quarter, even if you can't give us a date that paper's going to come forward. That will really help avoid situations like we've had with the public health question today, because it certainly isn't our intention to drop things in at the last minute. It makes life difficult for us as cabinet members as well. So the request is to try and populate that over a much longer period. When we have the new corporate strategy coming to the next month's meeting, it actually does give a timeline for some of the big key strategies over the next 2 years. So there's no reason why those strategies can't be dropped straight into the forward plan, and that will hopefully prompt everybody else to do the same thing. So with that, I'd like to close the meeting at 1:23 and wish you a good rest of the day.